Imagine a long and gentle night where the air carries the scent of soil, just touched by the first rain after an endless season. Imagine a gray sky slowly opening itself, revealing a pale color as calm as the earth's first breath after a long sleep. There is no need to rush, nothing to conclude tonight. Time can move slowly, like a quiet river beneath the moonlight. In this stillness, let your thoughts walk slowly, without demand for direction, just following the gentle current of a voice coming from a time so distant. A time before history knew its own name. That is where this story begins, among mists and echoes of ancient stones that still hold traces of the first hands that built the world. Picture yourself sitting at the edge of a vast plain beneath a starless sky. In the distance, something vibrates softly, like the slow pulse of an old earth. There are no cities, no languages, no songs. Only a world still blank, not yet fully formed. And in the midst of that emptiness, the first hands begin to work. They were not humans as we are now, perhaps taller, perhaps quieter, perhaps gentler in their understanding of nature. They knew how to speak to stone, how to read the direction of the wind, how to sense the will of the land. Every movement was like a prayer, and every stone they touched became part of a song never written. Tonight, you do not need to think hard. Let time pause gently in your mind. Feel how the world beneath your feet holds ancient layers, layers once touched by those hands. They were the first builders, architects before time. They shaped structures not to inhabit them, but to remind the earth of itself. The great stones we now call monoliths, dolmens, or menhirs may not have been mere markers or tombs, but frozen conversations. There is something soothing in imagining a world before words, when only the elements spoke. Wind brushing the sea's surface, water carving valleys, light dancing upon stone. All of these created the rhythm of life before humans arrived to name it. The first architects, wherever they came from, only followed patterns that already existed in nature. They did not command the world. They simply helped the world remember its own form. So tonight, you may lean back, close your eyes, and let this story flow in like a deep, slow breath. Imagine those first hands once again tracing over stone, drawing vast circles visible only from the sky. They worked in silence, without ambition, without script, without order. They built with intuition, with feeling, with the awareness that every form carries a soul and every stone holds memory. There is nothing to conclude from this story, nothing to solve, only a long journey back to a time when everything was just beginning. Perhaps you will feel something faint, a small vibration within your chest, as if that ancient world still breathes beneath the ground where you stand. Perhaps it is imagination, or perhaps something real, for in this world, the line between both is never quite clear. Breathe in slowly, exhale gently. Let your mind walk backward, across nameless time, toward the place where the first stone was raised by hands of unknown origin. There, among the silence that knew no language, stood the first foundation of what we would one day call civilization. This is the moment to be still and only listen. There was a time unrecorded by calendars, an age when the line between history and myth was blurred like mist over a cold valley. Around 12,000 years before the dates we know, the Earth had just awakened from its long sleep after an age of ice that swallowed the northern continents in silence. Seas once sealed by frost began to open their paths, and mountains buried in snow slowly revealed their backs like ancient beasts rising from slumber. Somewhere far within the northern circle, in a region now buried beneath, Arctic ice stood a land spoken of by the keepers of old tales as Hyperia, the land of eternal light where night never fully arrived and the sun hung low in a sky without time. It is said that a people once lived there, leaving no written traces but patterns in stone that no one has yet explained. The stones stood in vast circles, some sunken into the earth, others facing north, as if staring at something that had vanished. When modern scholars calculated the paths of stars and the alignment of those stones, all pointed toward a single place in the sky, a star that no longer exists. No one knows why or for whom those monuments were built, only faint whispers claiming the structures were not for worship, but to preserve the balance between the visible and the hidden worlds. The land of Hyperia, as described in the oldest legends of many nations, was said to be a place that did not know death. Not because its people were immortal, but because time did not behave as it did elsewhere. There was only one season and endless, gentle brightness, and each day flowed slowly like mist that never broke. Its waters were clear, its air cold, and its sky silvery white. Trees grew in strange curves, bending northward as if reaching for the source of an unending light. Beneath them ran rivers of pale blue, and from the cliffs flowed hot springs, said to be where the first architects heated their stones before raising them. They called themselves not humans, but reminders. Some oral records from later civilizations, like the Sumerians and the Vedic people, tell of beings who came from the north carrying instruments of celestial measure, teaching how to weigh stones, how to read the winds, and how to follow the path of the sun. They came briefly, built something, then vanished, leaving stone circles that still stand today. Across every ancient civilization runs the same quiet thread, the tale of craftsmen from the north. Nameless builders who came before all records began. If you stand upon an imagined map of the ancient world with your eyes closed, the lines begin to reveal themselves. From the Altai Plateau to Scandinavia, from Greenland to the Anatolian valleys, all are connected by unseen threads of light. They left no writing, yet left form. They did not record history, yet they shaped space. In silence, they taught the world how to speak through shape and direction. Many believe that when the Ice Age ended and the seas rose, Hyperia slowly sank beneath the encroaching ice. Yet some among them walked south, carrying the memory of perfect form. In those places, great stones now stand up retraced by unknown means. Perhaps they were not mere engineers, but poets who spoke through stone, giving the earth meaning through its own shape. Now, thousands of years later, the world only knows names that came to late Egypt, Sumer, Olmec, Atlantis. Yet before them all, there was something older, quieter, stiller. Something built not to be seen, but to be remembered by the earth itself. For perhaps stone has a longer memory than humankind, and within it lies the story of the first hands that did not wish to be known, only remembered by silence. Imagine the first morning in the land of Hyperia, when light did not come from any direction but seemed to emanate from the air itself. There was no sunrise, for the sky was always pale, like softly breathing silver. The air carried the scent of salt and metal, and from afar came the faint, dripping sound of melting ice from distant cliffs. Across a vast valley, mist rolled over damp ground, concealing the outlines of enormous stones arranged in patterns too perfect to be coincidence. Each stone had a smooth surface, as if carved by hands that never made mistakes, and between their cracks grew silver moss that shimmered faintly when touched by light. At the center of that landscape stood a structure greater than all others. A spiral stone tower rising into the sky like a finger trying to touch something unseen. It had no doors, no windows. Yet from within came a low hum, not born of the wind. Those who ventured close said they could feel its vibration in their chests, as if the heartbeat of the earth pulsed in harmony with the stone. No one knew what lay inside. Some believed it to be a celestial measuring device. Others thought it was a marker for beings that once came from the heavens. But in the oral traditions of ancient peoples, it was said the spiral tower was built to listen to the voice of the earth itself. The people of Hyperia were few, living scattered across valleys surrounded by eternal peaks of ice. Their houses were made of smooth stone and a light metal that never rusted, even after millennia. Metal artifacts found within the ruins show no oxidation, as though time itself could not erode them. They did not build cities like later civilizations, but instead made circular gathering places with an empty center. There they assembled during the stillness of their unmoving sun, to listen to the voice of the earth echoing through the surrounding stones. There is no evidence they knew war or boundaries. No weapons have been found, no graves, no distinction between the dwellings of leaders and those of others. All structures appear of equal size and form, as if they believed equality to be a law of nature rather than agreement. Even the children born there were said to hear low frequencies beyond ordinary hearing. They could sense when an earthquake would come or when the ice beneath the soil was about to crack. They did not fear the earth, for to them the earth was a living being, breathing with them. When night fell elsewhere, Hyperia never knew darkness. The sky turned a soft blue, and behind its faint light, the stars moved slowly, circling as if following a rhythm. On such nights, the people of Hyperia would emerge from their homes and walk silently toward the spiral tower. They carried no fire, for the air itself provided light. They walked in quiet lines, clad in garments woven from frozen plant fibers that shimmered softly like fish skin underwater. There was no song, no prayer, only a long silence, and the faint vibration of the stones resonating like the bass note of life itself. Sometimes, between the silence, a flash of light emerged from the base of the tower. It was not fire or lightning, but a pale blue glow that rose and faded slowly, leaving the sharp scent of ozone behind. The people of Hyperia never seemed surprised. They simply bowed their heads slightly, as though greeting something older than themselves, something that had existed long before they learned to shape stone. Perhaps to them, the tower was not built, but born a piece of the earth that emerged in a form humans could understand. An ancient Greek writer once described a northern land of endless light, where humans lived without sorrow. He wrote that they did not fear death, for they knew death was only a change of form within the same light. Perhaps he had heard the tale passed down by sailors who drifted too far north, and glimpsed a strange land where the air shimmered like glass, and the people spoke in tones more like music than speech. That story became the myth of the Land of Light, where humans first learned that stone could sing if touched by the right hands. If you close your eyes tonight and listen to the faint sound beneath the ground where you stand, perhaps the echo of that tower still lingers. For sound never dies, it only changes form. And perhaps within the faint ringing in your ears, there is a remnant of the tone of Hyperia, the land that never knew night. When Hyperia began to understand that the earth was not merely a place to stand upon, but a being that spoke through vibration, the ones later called the first builders were born those remembered in later legends as the ancient architects. There are no names recorded, for the people of that land did not believe in individual ownership of creation. They were simply known as the Stone Hands, a group of humans who listened to the world more deeply than anyone else. They did not use tools such as hammers or chisels, but placed their palms on the stone's surface and waited for its vibration to respond. When the stone agreed with their intent, it began to divide slowly, not through force, but through harmony. It was as though the stone permitted itself to change. Oral legend tells that they built the first structures on frozen plains that never thawed. There, they drew patterns on the ground using white mineral dust, following the shapes of sound waves they heard from within the earth. Each pattern became the foundation of a structure, and all their creations shared a trait: no sharp angles. Everything was circular, spiraling, or softly curved, for they believed that straight lines were artificial, something nature never made. In circular forms, energy flowed endlessly, like breath that never ceased. It is said that to form a single stone, they waited for 7 long seasons. They were never in haste, for time to them was not a line but a vortex. They obeyed the rhythm of the earth, working only when its vibration was balanced. On certain days when the earth grew to still, they stopped and sat for hours among the stones, listening, chanting low tones called the resonance call. Their voices were not loud, but enough to make the air quiver softly. And in due time, the stones would reply with a deep tone that resonated in the chest, a sign that the earth was ready to be touched again. There are no written records, only fine carvings on valley walls depicting humans with palms pressed to stone, lines radiating from their bodies merging with the earth. Modern archaeologists interpret these as symbols of unity between humans and nature. Yet in the old tales, they were literal. The first architects could alter the stone structure through sound and breath rhythm. Not magic, but a form of knowledge we have yet to understand. Some later accounts mention that their structures were not only beautiful, but alive. Their walls produced soft tones when touched by light. Their floors stayed warm even in freezing cold, and their rooms resonated with the voices of their occupants, making words linger longer than they should. Some researchers theorize that they used natural piezoelectric minerals, Yet that cannot explain the precision of the crystal patterns, as if formed from within. No metal tools were found near those sites, no traces of fire, no rough workmanship. Only perfect stone, standing in harmony beyond the reach of ordinary physics. One of the oldest surviving stories from Hyperion sailors tells of a place called Kharayan, a twin tower of milky white stone that reflected light in all directions without any flame. At its summit was said to be an empty chamber where air spun in a gentle vortex. When someone stood at its center, their breath broke into long notes, echoing down to the valley floor. They believed that place existed to remind humankind that every breath was an echo of the earth's own breathing. To them, architecture was not the art of building shelters, but a means to unite with the planet that sustained them. Yet, not all their structures remain visible. Some are buried beneath layers of ice, some sunk under northern seas, and others survive only as strange patterns on coastal stone. Modern expeditions that traced coordinates from ancient texts reported spiral formations on the seabed near Greenland, with magnetic patterns that defy explanation. Satellites have detected thermal anomalies under sheets of ice where no geothermal activity should exist. As if something beneath still lived, still moved slowly, waiting for a call no human remembers how to speak. The first architects may be gone, but their work still speaks, though in a language we no longer comprehend. They left no monuments for remembrance, only resonances hidden between stone and air. And perhaps in the long silence of the earth, spinning through the cosmic dark, the faint echo of those first hands still trembles, reminding the world that everything began not with a loud sound, but with a whisper almost too soft to hear. As time moved without direction, the legacy of the first architects was slowly swallowed by the earth they loved. The stones that once stood in balance beneath the northern light sank beneath thickening ice over the centuries. Crystal rain and polar winds cloaked their structures in a white shroud that reflected light until their original forms vanished. Among the stones that endured, some began to crack not from time, but from the earth changing its breath. The vibration that once sang to the builders now lay silent, as though waiting for someone to listen again. No one knows exactly when that civilization ended, for it did not vanish in destruction, but faded gently, like mist dissolving under sunlight. In ancient records written by southern explorers, there are tales of a northern land bathed in eternal light, where night never came and the wind carried a song like human voices. They called it the land without shadows, Hyperborea. Yet when later expeditions tried to reach it centuries after, they found only frozen plains devoid of life. No towers, no circles of stone, only vast silence that seemed to repel human presence. Strangely, their compasses spun aimlessly, and their metal tools turned unnaturally cold, as if the earth there refused to be touched again. Modern historians regard such stories as allegories of lost harmony of humankind, once so attuned to nature that they left no measurable trace. Yet some scientists remain uneasy about the strange findings near the poles. Stones too symmetrical to be natural. Magnetic formations spiraling across the seabed. Even fossils of tropical plants found where no warmth should exist. These fragments whisper from the past, defying logic, as if to say, the truth we seek has long been buried beneath the stillness of the world. In some ancient Siberian valleys, there are massive stones called the listening stones by locals. They believe these stones can answer questions with faint echoes when one speaks before them on a quiet night. The stone returns the voice with a long delay, repeating the last word in a lower tone. Researchers studying the phenomenon found the stones contain rare minerals capable of reflecting sound waves in unusual patterns. But the elders refuse to say more. They claim the answering voice is not an echo, it is the breath of the earth itself. A 19th century writer once described his visit there, saying that standing before the listening stone made him feel watched by something vast and patient. He wrote that for several minutes after speaking to it, his chest vibrated softly, as if a voice were trying to enter his thoughts. He never returned, but his final note read, "Perhaps the first architects never died. They merely changed form, becoming part of the earth that still speaks in frequencies we no longer hear." Every century, people arise claiming to rediscover the secret of the first builders. They speak of resonance, earth energy, and lost sound technology. Some are mocked as madmen. Others devote their lives to chasing patterns within confusion. Yet none can replicate their work. The stones they attempt to move remain still, rejecting the touch of modern hands. Some report strange dreams after visiting certain site streams of circling light and voices speaking in languages unknown yet deeply familiar, like memories from a life never lived. Among mystics, Hyperborea is not a place, but a state of awareness, a world that lies between mind and earth. They believe the first architects reached such balance that they could leave their bodies without dying, transforming into resonance that keeps the rhythm of the earth alive. When the earth quakes, they say it is not disaster, but the slow breath of the old builders still sleeping beneath the stone. And in the quiet of night, if one listens deeply enough, they may still hear that gentle note, the reminder that the world was never silent, only waiting for humans to listen again with still hearts. In the end, Hyperborea became legend, not because it was forgotten, but because it could not be explained without losing its meaning. It is not merely a place on an ancient map, but a quiet reminder that there was once a time when humans and the earth spoke the same language. That language is lost now, yet the faint echo of the first hands still lingers in the air, waiting for someone calm enough to hear it again. In that stillness, their secret may yet live hidden between stone, light, and the endless song of the turning earth. Imagine the first morning in a world without a name, when mist still clung to the skin of the earth like breath unwilling to leave. There, in a valley, surrounded by white mountains and rivers, gleaming like liquid glass, the first architects began their day unhurried. They did not know time as we do, for the northern sun never truly set, drifted slowly along the horizon like a lantern that refused to fade. The sound of their footsteps upon stone was like whispers, and the air carried the scent of salt from young, distant seas. There were no cities, no borders, only vast lands, just waking from the earth's long dream. Among them were those who shaped stone, not with chisels, but with hands touched by sound. They spoke to the rocks in low tones, and the surface trembled softly like water stirred by wind. The stone softened, changed shape gradually, as though understanding a language known only to those born of silence. They built great circles along the edges of the valleys, not for worship, not for shelter, but as a way to listen to the sky. When wind passed between the stones, it created a long hum that could be heard throughout the valley, a tone that shifted with the seasons and the sun's direction. They did not write, for words were not yet born. Instead, they left patterns on the earth's spirals and lines converging toward a center. Each line was not an image, but a memory stored upon the skin of the world. They believed that the earth spoke through shapes, not letters. That is why every stone held meaning, every line held direction, and every shadow played its part in the long song they wove for time. Nothing was rushed, for they lived not to conquer time, but to weave themselves within it. When night came, if it could be called night, they gathered upon high plains and watched the aurora dance like green rivers in the sky. Some closed their eyes and listened to the sounds from beneath the ground, a rhythm only the sensitive could feel. That sound pulsed like the heartbeat of the earth. They called it the old breath, and by it they attuned the rhythm of their bodies. When they slept, their breathing matched the vibration, their bodies merging with the land itself. In their dreams, the earth dreamed with them, and the next day the stones grew softer, yielding more easily to their touch. The children of that people learned not from teachers, but from echoes. They sat beside clear rivers and listened to the currents speaking in patterns. If they were calm enough, they began to understand the meaning. The water told when the seasons would shift, when the sky would open, when the mountains would sing again. Their knowledge was not written, but embedded in air, in sound, in light. To them, the world was a living library, and every gust of wind was a page that could be read by those patient enough to listen. Their meals were simple, drawn from sea and root. Yet every time they ate, they performed a small ritual, not in speech, but in low tones that caused the water in their bowls to ripple softly. They believed that all things entering the body carried memory, and in honoring it, they kept the balance between body and world. There was no war, no ownership, for they believed nothing could truly be possessed. All things merely passed through, like shadows of clouds on the surface of water. Their society had no kings, no temples, no commands. Everyone knew their part without being told. Some guarded the stones, some listened to the sky, some shielded children from sounds too strong. They lived in meaningful silence, where every act was an unspoken prayer. Sometimes when the wind howled and the valley filled with a high ringing of stone, they all stopped and sat quietly, for they knew it was not mere wind, but a message from those who had already become one with the earth. Some nights, the northern sky glowed soft red. They believed it was a sign that another world was passing close, a world parallel to theirs. In that light, their shadows grew longer, and some claimed to see other figures walking among them, human-like, but taller, with eyes glowing gently like deep seawater. None were afraid, for they believed those beings were not strangers, but elder kin, checking whether the world still hummed in harmony. Even now, archaeologists digging in the northern highlands find traces they cannot explain. Giant stones arranged in perfect circles, though the means to move them did not exist in that age. their surfaces smooth as glass, some bearing marks like ripples frozen in water. There are no signs of tools, no metal residue, only surfaces shaped as if by sound. The modern world cannot explain how they did it, perhaps because such things were never meant to be explained, only felt. Their days passed slowly, like water finding its own path among the stones. There were no ticking clocks, no measure of time except for the colors changing in the northern sky. They worked in silence, every motion following a rhythm that seemed to come from the earth itself. When the sun touched the highest mountain peaks, they paused not to rest, but to listen to something indescribable. In that stillness, the air grew heavy, as though carrying echoes from an age that had not yet begun. Sometimes they looked at each other and, without speaking, they knew what they heard was not of nature, but something older than the sky itself. They believed every stone held memory. Every mountain witnessed what the world had forgotten. So whenever they built a new circle or raised a pillar, they never carved without permission. They waited for a sign. It could appear as a strange reflection in the water, or the rare cry of a bird that came only once in a long season. When the sign arrived, they moved together, slowly, with precision like a dance without music. Each step carried the certainty that their hands were merely extensions of a greater will. One day, within the unwritten calendar of the sky, they found a stone unlike the others. It was black and cold, even under sunlight. It did not vibrate or respond to sound, as though rejecting all forms of communication. The elders surrounded it for 3 days in silence, sitting and watching. On the third night, one of them stood and placed his palm on the stone. The earth quivered softly, as if taking a deep breath. By morning, the stone had split in two, revealing an inner glow like the moon veiled in mist. They called it the sleeping heart, and from that moment, they lit its glow with each changing season so the earth would remember its own pulse. Children were forbidden to approach the stone not out of fear, but reverence. The stone keepers kept vigil in silence, eating nothing and sleeping not for 7 nights. They believed that during those nights, the world beneath the ground opened slightly, revealing a current that carried the life of all things. In their half-conscious state, some claimed to see rivers of light flowing beneath the surface, branching like roots, pulsing like the veins of the earth. They realized the structures they built above ground were reflections of forms already existing below. Every stone they placed echoing an unseen shape of the underworld. In that valley, each season carried its own tone of sound. During the long winters, the air produced a low hum through the stone crevices, like a song of endless sorrow. During the seasons of light, it became a high pitch that made the skin prickle. Some believed those tones were not mere chants, but messages from those without bodies. They said the spirits walked among the stones on certain nights, checking if the circles still aligned with the sky. Sometimes, with eyes closed, they felt a soft touch on their shoulders, like a hand reminding without frightening. A shadowed writer, living long after their age, once wrote that the valley still vibrated, even beneath layers of modern civilization. He said that if one stood at the center of the stone circle at midnight during certain seasons, the air would grow dense, and the ears would catch a deep hum rising from the chest. The sound did not come from outside, but from something the human body remembered since the dawn of time. No device could record it, for it was not meant to be heard, but felt like an echo from a memory never lived. No one knows where that civilization went. There are no records, no bones, no signs of destruction. Only the standing stones, defying decay after millennia. Some researchers believe they did not die, but returned into the earth, merging with vibration, becoming part of the soil's layers, the current beneath the rivers of light they once saw. That is why whenever a great storm or small quake shakes the northern lands, some elders whisper that it is only them, the first architects, shifting slowly beneath the ground, realigning the balance so the world keeps breathing. Time moved without direction there, like a current that no longer knew where the sea was. The wind came from the north, carrying fine grains unlike snow, lighter than dust, colder than mist. Within those thin layers, wanderers from a distant age found impossible traces. Stone circles half buried in frozen soil, forming patterns unlike anything in the modern world. There were no carvings, no names, only forms too precise to be random. They mapped every stone, and when the maps were joined, a shadow appeared like a star folding into itself. No logical explanation existed. Every theory ended with the same line that perhaps those who built this did not think in human logic. Thousands of years later, in an age full of machines and measurement, an archaeologist from the north rediscovered the site through aerial images. He did not believe in legend, nor in tales of hands before time. Yet something in the picture held him silent. The pattern seen from above was not merely circular, but made of intersecting lines with near-perfect mathematical ratios. When calculated, each angle seemed aligned with the sun's position on certain days in a forgotten cycle. He wrote in his field notes that the pattern looked like a clock, not meant to mark hours, but to count silences recurring every few thousand years. The following days blended awe and unease. Each layer of soil revealed something harder to explain. A stone tablet was found, too smooth to have been made with stone tools, yet containing no metal. When touched, its surface felt warm, as though holding the lingering heat of hands long vanished. At its center was a small spiral indentation turning clockwise, and when sunlight struck it at a certain angle, it reflected a trembling shimmer like living water. Some team members felt dizzy when they stared too long. Others swore they heard a low whisper rising from within the ground. At night, around the campfire, their talk was thick with quiet. No one wanted to sound superstitious, yet no one denied that the air there was unlike anywhere else. The temperature dropped fast after sunset, but the firelight never seemed to flicker, as if the flame itself refused to die. One of them, a young woman whose eyes missed nothing, said flatly that perhaps they were not uncovering a ruin, but something that had never truly been left behind. Her words lingered long, like smoke refusing to fade. A few nights later, they found a door. Not a door as we know it, but a vast curve in the rock that seemed to resist touch. Under moonlight, it looked like frozen water caught mid-flow. They tried knocking, and the sound was not that of stone, echoed as if from far beneath the earth. There was no crack, no hinge, but the shape looked made to be passed through by something not human. One technician pressed his ear against it and stumbled back, pale-faced. He said there was a sound behind it, not a voice, but a slow, rhythmic thud, like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant below the ground. The next morning, they sealed the site and stopped digging. No official report followed, only a short note in a journal that was never published. Some of the team returned to the city and never worked again. Yet years later, when the thaw reached deeper than usual, locals reported faint tremors from that valley. The sound came like a slow, heavy breath that paused as if aware it was being heard. No one dared approach. People began calling it the Listening Valley, a place where the earth never truly slept. One small account remained from a supply keeper who had not joined the excavation. He wrote that on the last night before they left, he saw a faint blue light at the foot of the mountain. Thinking it moonlight on ice, he watched as it moved, slowly, like someone carrying a lantern in the air. The light stopped in the center of the stone circle, then faded into the ground, leaving no trace. The next morning, he found a small circular mark in the snow, warm to the touch. No one believed him, yet he never returned to that valley again for the rest of his life. When the next season came, the valley was once again swallowed by snow, thicker than before. There were no signs of excavation, no tents or tools left behind. Only a white plain, silent as if the world had just been reborn. Yet for those attuned to subtle things, something felt off. The wind shifted slightly. Birds that used to migrate across the region now avoided it completely. And nights were brighter than usual, as though a dim light beneath the ground never went out. The remaining researchers called it an atmospheric phenomenon, the effect of ice crystals reflecting the moon. But the old villagers had another name for it. They called it the breath of the world before man. In an old Northern University archive, there was a secret report never published. It contained geological data from the valley floor showing a delicate, rhythmic vibration, like a pulse. The pattern appeared only at certain times of the year, especially when the sun sat lowest on the horizon. No physical source could be found, yet instruments recorded a consistent rhythm lasting several minutes before vanishing. A senior professor scribbled a trembling note in the margin. He wrote, "Perhaps this is not the earth shaking, but something remembering that it once lived." That sentence ensured the document was sealed in a special archive and never opened again. Meanwhile, thousands of kilometers away, in a stony desert untouched by ice, the same pattern was found. Among red sands and barren hills lay a circle of stones almost identical in size and alignment to the one in the northern valley. No geographical link was possible. The distance was too vast, but when both sites were mapped together, an imaginary line formed that pointed directly to Earth's pole. Some scientists claimed it was a coincidence shaped by nature. But those who studied deeper knew coincidence had no such precision. One of them wrote privately that perhaps these were not two sites, but two ends of one immense structure buried beneath the Earth's surface. At the same time, ancient legends from unrelated cultures began to echo each other. From the Tibetan highlands, old tribes spoke of a city built by beings of light who came from the northern sky and vanished when the world grew cold. In coastal Scandinavia, Old tales of ice guardians living under the White Mountains describe the same detailed footsteps echoing inside stone halls that no one could find. Even in distant Pacific islands, old priests spoke of an underworld connected to the north, a place where the sun never set. Each myth seemed separate, yet they shared a thread, something beneath the earth that remembered, waited, and perhaps still breathed. From these whispers emerged a bolder theory, proposed by a small circle of interdisciplinary scientists working in secret. They believed what was found in the Northern Valley was not a ruin from the past, but a doorway to a planetary architectural system older than humankind itself. Computer simulations suggested that when expanded, the stone pattern formed a geometric network encircling the Earth, linking certain points with abnormal magnetic resonance. Some of these points lay deep beneath the sea, others at mountaintops, and the rest hidden under deserts. If activated, the system could generate a planetary resonance, as if the Earth were remembering its original form. No one knew how to activate it, and perhaps it was never meant to be. Yet, even untouched, strange signs persisted. Compasses in the north began drifting a few degrees every winter. Satellite signals frequently faltered when passing near the valley, and animals refused to approach even when nothing threatened them. Locals resumed using the ancient name of the place, the land that keeps memory. They believed as long as the valley remained frozen, the world beneath would stay asleep. But if the ice ever melted completely, something would awaken. No one knew what. No one dared to find out. Among the old surviving records, there was one unidentified fragment of writing. It was found inside a stone chest in a small museum in Iceland, with no explanation of how it arrived there. The markings appeared to have been carved with an extremely sharp tool, not using ink or charcoal, but something that burned the surface of the paper into black scars, so written with embers long extinguished. The fragment contained a sequence of symbols unlike any known alphabet. Yet, upon close study, researchers found a pattern resembling mathematical waveforms, repeating like the rhythm of breath. One expert converted the symbols into digital data, and what appeared on the screen was not text, but a three-dimensional visualization resembling an underground map. There were no coordinates or compass points, only a spiraling form descending endlessly. Weeks after the discovery, the laboratory conducting the analysis burned down under mysterious circumstances. All digital data vanished, leaving only the paper copy of the fragment, now hidden in a secret vault. But word had already spread, and independent researchers began searching for similar references in ancient archives. In Egypt, a papyrus spoke of earth markers inscribed by hands before the first sun. In Greece, an old manuscript described the ancient architects who built structures to keep the world from collapsing inward. Even in India, ancient texts spoke of the first shapers who arranged the world using sound rather than stone. Despite their distant origins, the similarities among these tales were too deliberate to be coincidence. Most modern historians dismissed such claims as mythological allegories, spiritual metaphors for creation and natural cycles. Yet a small circle of thinkers refused to leave it at that. They believed the phrase, "first architects," was not symbolic, but literal. describing a race or entity that existed long before human history began. According to them, the ancient global structures were not early human efforts, but remnants of a vast design with a forgotten purpose. Some called it the world-based network, a planetary system built to stabilize the Earth's axis, regulate its magnetic balance, or sustain an underlying frequency of life. There was an intriguing account from a 19th century explorer named Theodor Wechsler. In his private journal, he described a journey through Siberia where he found a massive stone formation too precise to be natural. Each stone, he wrote, felt warm to the touch despite the freezing air. When he pressed his ear to one, he heard a faint hum, beating like a pulse from below. In his final entry, before vanishing without trace, he wrote a single line: "This world is not earth and sky, but a machine once awakened by hands now gone." Wechsler's account was dismissed as exhaustion-induced delirium till a century later, when scientists uncovered a similar stone structure buried beneath frozen soil. Carbon analysis dated it to more than 20,000 years old, far older than any known civilization. The stones were arranged in a precise double spiral converging to a hollow center. There were no bodies, no artifacts, only emptiness. As though the place had not been built for habitation, but for waiting. Scholars argued whether it was a ritual site, an observatory, or part of a vast mechanism now stilled. No conclusion emerged, only deeper uncertainty. A Norwegian geologist once said that if humanity dug deep enough, they would uncover not history, but the foundation of existence itself. He believed that beneath the oldest strata of rock lay remnants of a design from an unrecorded age, when the planet had no name and the ancient hands were still shaping it. Perhaps they were not gods, only beings whose minds no longer resemble ours. Whatever they built, it still stands, still pulses, and somehow still waits to be understood. There exists an unpublished theory, whispered only among a small circle of researchers who no longer trust the conventional timeline of history. They call it the Cedars hypothesis, the idea that the first architects were not of Earth, but visitors from a realm without day or night, where light arose not from the sun, but from the very center of space itself. The theory stems from the cryptic notes of a French scholar named Lucien Maréchal, who spent his life in the early 20th century studying massive stone formations across the world. In his final manuscript, found in his Lyon home after he died alone, one line left readers puzzled. They came not from the stars, but from beneath a light older than time. No one knew what it meant. Some said it was the rambling of a man slipping into madness, while others believed he had discovered something too vast for human language to explain. In that same manuscript, Maréchal described repeating symbolic shapes carved into ancient structures. He found identical spirals and parallel lines among megaliths in England, Peru, and Turkey. Each spiral turned in alternating directions, as though two forces were dancing between the layers of existence. To him, they were not decorative carvings or ritual marks, but part of a greater design, possibly to balance something unseen. Maréchal believed the early builders saw the world not as matter, but as energy flowing through time and space. The stones they erected were not monuments, but instruments resonators meant to maintain the earth. rhythm in harmony with its original source. His ideas were later adopted by fringe scientists working outside formal academia. They gathered underground radar data, satellite imagery, and electromagnetic resonance readings from ancient sites. One of their findings revealed a correlation between the stones. Natural resonance, frequency, and the Earth's Schumann waves the planet's low hum echoing in the atmosphere. When visualized, the data formed spirals strikingly similar to Maresh-Hou's symbols. There was no solid proof, yet the resemblance stirred the thought that perhaps the stones were components of a planet-wide network, still faintly connected even now. Esoteric groups took these ideas further, crafting stranger beliefs. They claimed the first architects came from a parallel realm, vibrating at a different frequency that sometimes brushed against our own. To them, great stone sites like Stonehenge, Göbekli Tepe, and Baalbek were resonance gates points where the two realities nearly touched. They said that during rare celestial alignments, the gates opened not physically, but vibrationally, allowing knowledge to pass between worlds. None of this could be verified, of course, yet some travelers swore they had heard faint humming while standing among the ancient stones at dusk, as if the world itself were breathing through them. In a now-lost documentary, only surviving as a damaged audio recording, a man calling himself the keeper of the primary layer spoke in a slow, steady tone. He claimed the first architects never left. They simply retuned themselves, lowering their frequency below the threshold of human perception. They exist now beneath the surface, not physically underground, but in a layer of resonance, half a step from our world. He said that every great stone still standing acts as an anchor, maintaining the balance between layers. As long as the stones remain upright, the world stays aligned with its primal pulse. But when the last one falls, that harmony will collapse, returning Earth to its unstable original form. If this theory holds truth, we are not heirs to their world, but tenants within the system they've built. We live upon a mechanism designed for another purpose, one that continues to function beyond our comprehension. What we call nature may be the ongoing program of their creation, maintaining rhythm and rotation, ensuring that all remains in place, within the stillness of stone and the silence of mountains. Perhaps their voices remain waiting for those patient enough to listen once more. Among mountains cloaked in eternal mist and valleys untouched by the warmth of summer light lies a place some call the heart of the world. No map records its location, yet many ancient traditions name it in different forms. In Tibet, it is Shambhala. In old Persian records, Vara. In Egyptian texts, Aruth, a field between worlds. All describe the same essence, an invisible center maintaining balance between the seen and the unseen. Rational archaeologists dismiss it as a spiritual allegory, yet a few believe it is real, though not fixed in place. They say it moves with Earth's rotation, a pulse shifting beneath the planet's skin. Across ancient texts, similar images appear, circles of light in lands without shadow. Hindu scriptures call it the breathing point of the earth, where energy rises from below, carried by winds that hum softly like a song. Inuit legends tell of a northern valley bathed in everlasting light, where sky and land merge in pale blue. There, they say, the first builders came and went, leaving circles of stone now buried under ice. South American tales describe a high plateau where the air feels heavy. And on certain nights, stones glow faintly like embers. These stories, from distant places and times, speak of the same heart as if a hidden thread connects the whole world through points upon its surface. Secret expeditions in the 19th and 20th centuries sought this heart of the world. The most famous was led by Russian scientist Alexander Yaroslav in 1928. He set out from Mongolia toward Tibet with a small group and simple geological tools. In his final journal, found in the ruins of their camp at Mount Kunlun, he wrote of a strange phenomenon. Compasses failed. Metal watch needles spun on their own, as if drawn by something underground. On the last night before a great storm, they heard a deep rhythmic sound, not human, but coming from the earth itself. None returned, and only fragments of their notes survived, half destroyed by wind and ice. Since then, theories about the heart have diverged. Some call it a geological event, perhaps magnetic resonance or molten flow within the mantle producing an audible beat. Others believe it is an ancient energy nexus, a gravitational spiritual center once used by humanity's first rituals. A few interdisciplinary thinkers try to bridge the two, suggesting Earth's core may not be pure molten iron, but an organic or crystalline structure generating resonance fields that influence living consciousness. In their theory, the heart is a regulating system still active today, and the first architects merely copied its mechanism on the surface through aligned stones and star-oriented temples. Mystics of old described the heart as both beginning and end. To them, the planet was not an inert object spinning in a void, but a living being, breathing and pulsing. When its rhythm slowed, civilizations fell. When it strengthened, life flourished, and the heavens brightened. In Central Asian tribes, annual rituals were held atop mountains. Fires were lit, and the people imitated the sound they believed echoed from Earth's core along. Low hum rolling through air and stone until it felt like the world itself was breathing. They called it the original tone, and believed that by repeating it, humanity preserved its balance with the planet beneath their feet. Now, in this noisy century, a few still try to listen. Some meditate in caves, others climb peaks to hear wind moving through ancient rock. They do not seek proof or certainty, for they know there may be none. They only wish to feel again the subtle connection once known to the first builders, the link between humankind, the earth, and something deeper than words can reach. They believe that as long as someone can still hear the planet's faint heartbeat, the heart of the world has not truly stopped. Stone circles scattered across continents are often dismissed as primitive ceremonial relics. Yet some believe they are not temples at all, but vast instruments of resonance built to capture and channel the Earth's vibration. From Stonehenge in England, Nabta Playa in Egypt, Gunung Padang in the Indonesian highlands, to Göbekli Tepe in Anatolia, the patterns are nearly identical. Massive stones precisely arranged, aligned with celestial points, and spaced in ratios that reflect low sound frequencies beyond human hearing. It seems the first architects understood something modern science has forgotten, that Earth itself is a living instrument. And these circles of stone are its strings, tuned to communicate with it. Under certain conditions, when wind and humidity align, the stones produce low tones felt as soft tremors in the chest rather than sounds in the ear. Experimental archaeology has verified such effects. Stones arranged in tight circles can amplify infrasound waves generated by wind or human footsteps on compacted soil. In Celtic tradition, stone circles were said to be places where the earth spoke. People would wait for nights when the moon hung low on the horizon, sitting silently at the center to feel the planet's breath beneath them. Some recorded a faint pulsing, like a living creature's breath. Scientists explain it as natural resonance caused by air pressure and rock density. Yet each site hums differently, as though each has its own fundamental nota-distinct musical character carved into the landscape. In the Andes, researchers found the ancient site of Sacsayhuaman, where stones fit so tightly together, not even a needle could slip between them. At dusk, when air grew dense, visitors reported hearing a deep, droning sound emanating from the stones. A similar phenomenon occurs on Easter Island when sea winds rush through caves beneath the Moai statues. The sound is long and heavy, a cry from the past echoing through stone, making listeners feel small and solitary amid the vast ocean. Modern scientists tried to record it, yet the results were faint, barely detectable frequencies, as if the earth whispered rather than echoed. Some concluded that shape, orientation, and electromagnetic fields might interact, producing what could only be called the Earth's voice. Geophysicists argue these are examples of seismophony, sound produced by microvibrations within shifting tectonic plates. But if that's the case, how did ancient builders choose sites exactly where the resonance was strongest? Did they possess tools we have lost, or sensitivity we no longer have? Many myths claim the first builders did not speak as we do, but used pure tones capable of moving stone, bending metal, even changing the wind's direction. Tales are labeled myth, yet Egyptian texts speak faintly of a sound that lifts stone, a ritual using collective tone to raise pyramid blocks. There is no direct evidence, yet viewed through resonance physics, the idea is not impossible. The notion that the earth responds to sound is strangely alluring. Swiss researcher Leonhard Reiser once claimed to record a low-frequency pulse beneath Mount Ararat, repeating every 7 hours, like the heartbeat of a vast body. He called it the mother tone and believed that all great stones on Earth are receivers of signals from deep below. To him, every ancient stone site formed a planetary acoustic network, not built for worship, but for maintaining tonal balance between Earth and sky. He even speculated that when this resonance is disrupted, earthquakes, eruptions, and extreme weather follow as the planet retunes its natural pitch. Today, a few people try to revive this lost art of listening. They build simple instruments of stone and metal, place them in deserts, mountains, or coastal plains, and wait for the wind to play notes they cannot create themselves. To them, the low hum is not a puzzle to solve, but an ancient message from a planet still speaking softly. They believe the first architects never sought to command the earth. They only learned to listen on, in doing so, became part of a great, endless symphony. There's a theory bolder than mere earth resonance and notion, poised between science and ancient mysticism. Some researchers and mystics believe that in the age of the first architects, stone was not merely a building material, but a key to opening unseen layers of reality. They claim each great stone has a crystalline structure capable of storing specific sound frequencies. And when arranged in precise patterns, the stones could create energy vortices that open pathways into other dimensions. For many, this sounds like legend, yet across the world, strange and consistent testimonies appear. Travelers, hikers, and researchers camping near ancient stone sites often describe similar experiences. They hear faint hums before dawn, see dim lights between the stones, or feel their bodies grow weightless, as though gravity stops for a brief instant. These accounts could be hallucinations, yet they are too numerous to ignore. In the Orkney Islands of northern Scotland lies the Ring of Brodgar. When dense fog descends and humidity peaks, the stones shimmer faintly, as if lit from within. In 1906, archaeologist Magnus Gunn wrote that the pillars seemed to tremble as he stood within the circle. And though the air was still, he heard a long, deep, rhythmic breath. He offered no explanation, only a closing line. There is something here that does not belong to our world. That sentence was found in his private journal after his death and remains preserved in the Kirkwall City archives. A similar phenomenon was discovered in Siberia, where a partially buried stone ring lies in the Yakutian highlands. Some stones contain unusually high quartz content, and when subjected to ultrasonic waves, they reflect signals that form non-random patterns. Scientists explained it as a natural piezoelectric effect, but one detail defied reason. The reflected signal matched the geometry of the stone arrangement above ground, as if the structure were designed to transmit or receive communication. Some speculate the first builders understood how to harness the Earth's energy, now called the Schumann resonance, an electromagnetic pulse encircling the planet. By using specific frequencies, they may have stabilized or even altered human consciousness near those sites. For ancient peoples, this was not technology, was communion. They did not separate science from belief or matter from spirit. To them, resonant stones were not dead objects, but the living body of Earth. Every vibration was speech, every echo a reply. In valleys where great stones still stand, rituals were performed not to ask, but to listen. A tradition in Iceland endures, where people press their ears to large rocks, waiting for faint whispers they call the song of the mountain. Some claim to hear a long tone like a flute emerging from the earth. Modern researchers approach this through quantum physics, proposing that space is not empty, but filled with an energy field capable of resonance. If a structure aligns with that field, it may form frequency and normalize a small window where reality interferes with itself. In this view, ancient stones may not be monuments at all, but consciousness modulators, enabling travelers to cross boundaries between the physical and the subtle. No proof exists, yet this theory reshapes how we see the past. What we call myth might be an ancient description of phenomena beyond our scientific lexicon. Perhaps the first architects did not build to be seen, but to be felt. They created spaces that moved people not through shape, but through stillness and vibration suspended in the air. They understood reality as flexible, bendable by sound, opened by silence. On quiet nights, when only the wind moves, Perhaps they stood within their stone circles, eyes closed, listening to the earth's tone. For a moment beyond time, they might have glimpsed another world, not one outside, but one resonating within. On moonless nights, when the sky was so dark, the sea seemed to swallow the stars. The first architects worked in profound silence. There were no torches, no flames, only the faint reflection of starlight shimmering on the massive stones. They built slowly, for to them, time did not flow like a river, but revolved in endless circles. Every stone they raised had a place already decided long before their birth. As if there were a map readable only by intuition, not eyes. In an ancient cave carving found in the Caucasus, humans are shown standing before a circle of light, arms outstretched, as if listening to the earth. The carving is believed to predate the use of metal, the invention of the wheel, perhaps even the full birth of language itself. Every motion they made was precise yet free from measurement tools. Modern researchers remain puzzled at how they moved stones, weighing hundreds of tons across valleys and hills without the technology we know. In the highlands of Sacsayhuaman in Peru, enormous stones locked together with stunning precision, with no gap even for a sheet of paper. In Egypt, the pyramids stand aligned to geometric accuracy still admired today. On Easter Island, the Moai statues face the sea with silent expressions, as if waiting for something that never returned. Perhaps all of these came from a single source of knowledge, not one passed through writing, but through the hum of the earth and the sounds heard only by still souls. Legends across the world speak of giants who live beside humans, helping them lift stones and build temples. Yet perhaps the giants were not beings of size, but of awareness. In the ancient Vedic texts, beings called asura possessed the ability to shape the world through sound. They did not speak, but when they sang, mountains moved and rivers changed course. Maybe these legends are ancient ways of describing what we now call sound technology and resonance. Sound is not merely vibration in air. It is a wave that can influence matter, organize particles, and alter structure. Imagine that ancient night. Atop a lonely hill, a group of humans stood around a pale glowing stone. They began to sing a long, low tone. Their voices echoed through the valley, reflected off the stone surface, and returned stronger. The stone trembled softly, the ground beneath it quivering until the air itself pulsed. They kept singing deeper and slower, until the stone shifted, obeying their will. There was no magic, no supernatural force, only profound understanding of how the world worked, and how the human body could join the symphony of creation. Some modern archaeoacoustic studies have explored this mystery. At sites like the Hypogeum in Malta, chambers were found to resonate powerfully at specific frequencies. When a person spoke at 110 Hz, the entire space vibrated in harmony, shaking the chest. This frequency is believed to alter human brainwaves, inducing deeper states of consciousness. Perhaps the first architects discovered this thousands of years before science existed. They carved stones not just to stand, but to sing with the earth. No written record names them. Yet across the world, the pattern repeats. Great stones arranged in circles, lines, or spirals, following the stars above. In Hyperborea, Legend says they built temples of ice that never melted beneath a sun that never set. In Lemuria, they built towers beneath the sea, now buried by coral and time. In the Indus Valley, they carved symbols shaped like sound waves, like musical notes from a forgotten age. These traces form fragments of a song once played to the world, now only its echo remains among ruins. That night, between mountains and sea, they worked without words. Only breath and footsteps on wet soil. Stone by stone rose beneath a light nod of the sun. Perhaps they knew what they built was not for themselves, but for us. Far in the future, to remind us of something long forgotten, that the world is alive and that once we spoke to it. When the first dawn touched the peaks of the stones they had raised, something strange began to happen. The sunlight did not merely illuminate the surface, it seeped within, like water soaking through clear crystal. The stones reflected a soft, cold light, as if returning what they had stored through the long night. The first architects stood still, wordless, knowing that light was not merely brightness, but a message long entrusted to the earth. Each stone was a vessel, each surface a page without letters, and every falling shadow formed sentences readable only by those who waited. On that cold morning, the world spoke in a way it never did again. Modern minds often assume ancient structures were religious monuments or astronomical markers, yet some researchers see something deeper. Between the crevices of megalithic walls, patterns of reflected light shift with the seasons. At Stonehenge, the midsummer sun casts a perfect line between two upright stones, leading to the circle's heart. In Egypt, the Great Pyramid reflects the setting sun so that its shadow forms an inverted triangle on the ground, a symbol of balance between upper and lower realms. Meanwhile, at Göbekli Tepe in Anatolia, the pillars are arranged not only to align with stars, but to form resonance patterns resembling sound waves carved in sand. Perhaps these buildings were not temples at all, but instruments of communication between humans, the earth, and the heavens. Some stones seem to possess life of their own. When touched, they feel warm, as if still storing energy from millennia past. On quiet nights, wanderers have reported hearing faint hums within the rock, like a low whisper from the earth's belly. The sound carries no words, only a tone that makes the chest heavy and the eyes calm. Some say it is imagination born of fatigue. Others believe it is the lingering echo of the first builders, still resonating through their creations. If that is true, these stones are not dead matter, but living archives, repeating the same ancient message to whoever is willing to listen. The first architects understood this without writing it down. Us. They knew that form is language, and that every line or curve carries meaning deeper than words. In some Mesopotamian ruins, recurring spiral motifs are carved with precise care. The design looks simple, yet when the afternoon light hits, its shadow shifts every minute, as if depicting the movement of time itself. A historian once wrote that perhaps the spiral is the symbol of consciousness senselessly circling, rising and falling between visible and unseen realms. If so, ancient architecture is a prayer frozen in stone, and every stone is a sentence linking humanity to something larger than itself. Some ancient tales even claim the stones can remember the human voice. In the Altai Mountains, an old tribe believes that when one speaks sincerely before a sacred rock, their voice remains inside for 7 generations. When their descendants come and touch the stone, the echo returns, soft as wind. Modern science calls it myth. Yet acoustic experiments reveal that certain rocks indeed reflect frequencies uniquely, producing delayed echoes. Perhaps the first builders discovered this long before science named it. They knew that every word ever spoken is never lost, only transformed and waiting to be heard again. When night fell once more and the stars reappeared, the trapped light within the stones began to glow faintly, answering the departed sun. The architects sat around the circle of stone, eyes empty yet hearts full. They did not pray or chant, for there was nothing to ask. The world was already perfect in its silence, and their duty was to keep the harmony alive. Generation after generation, they returned to the same place, mending cracks, replacing what was lost, guardians of a rhythm that never slept. When they finally vanished into the soil, the stones remained, still standing, still holding the soft fire of a light that never dies. Between the stretching night and the deep silence, the stones began to reveal something unseen before. As the wind moved slowly across the valley, the soft light trapped inside the stone structures pulsed gently, like a rhythmic breath. There was no fire, no sound, yet the vibration could be felt on the skin, like the heartbeat of the earth, soft but constant. Those standing nearby felt as if they were beside a sleeping creature, calm yet aware. No one knew whether the stones were truly alive or merely reflecting stored energy. But on that quiet night, the boundary between the living and the lifeless grew thin. The first architects did not fear this phenomenon. They did not try to conquer or explain it, only to observe and listen. They believed that every object on earth held a memory, and that memory could be awakened through patience. Stone, water, wind, and fire were not separate elements to them, but parts of one great body breathing slowly. They built not to mark power or worship gods, but to help the earth remember itself. With each stone raised, they helped the world rewrite fragments of its forgotten story. When one stood in the circle and closed their eyes, they could hear something deep within, the whisper of names long lost. Over time, the light within the stones began to change color, sometimes pale blue like ice, other times golden like honey. The keepers said that the colors followed the emotions of the sky. For when a storm approached or a northern star fell, the stones trembled and shimmered differently. Travelers who came in winter spoke of the sky opening above them and beams of light descending upon the stones, making them glow from within. Some said it was only an atmospheric illusion, yet others swore they saw faint human-like figures move within the glow, silhouettes standing inside the rock itself. Some stones even seemed to hold shadows within, not reflections from outside, but dark forms moving slowly inside. During the full moon, those shadows appeared to dance, swirling inside the rock like flowing mist. No one knew what the motion meant, but the architects saw it as proof that the spirit of the earth remained awake. They believed that within every stone there was a core of light and a core of shadow, and both must remain balanced or the world would crack. When the balance broke, the stone grew cold and fractured, losing its light. The builders would return, not with tools, but by sitting around the stone, sending calm and intent as one would soothe an old friend in pain. Modern experts might dismiss it all as primitive ritual. Yet to those ancient builders, the bond between human and stone was real. Stone was not an object, but a witness, a reminder, and a guardian. They understood that time did not simply move forward, it settled, layering memories on the surface of the world. Perhaps that is why stone seems eternal. It does not age like flesh and blood, but preserves the trace of every touch that ever met it. In the deepest silence, it speaks, not in words, but in dancing light, in recurring tremors, and in feelings logic cannot name. That night, the architects sat around the circle, watching the light drift through the thin mist. They knew what they saw was not mere starlight, but the world's memory breathing. Generations would come and go, yet the stones would remain, waiting, guarding secrets unwritten on any scroll. They did not know that millennia later, humans would return, trying to decode every corner, every groove, every crack on their surface. But that night, beneath the fading sky, none of that had yet begun. There was only stone, wind, and living light. As the seasons shifted and the sun tilted slightly in the sky, the earth's voice began to grow clearer among the stones. It was not a sound one could hear with ears, but a vibration that moved from ground to bone, from air to chest. In the center of the stone circle, the air felt denser, as if filled with an endless echo. If one stood still long enough, their breathing would fall in rhythm with the pulse beneath the soil, as though their body aligned with the heartbeat of the world. The keepers of the stones called it the song that no one composed, a melody that had existed long before the first human looked up at the sky. They believed the earth did not merely hold history, but sang of it. The resonance from the deep was not coincidence, was the ancient language once understood by the first builders. The sound was never the same. Some days it came softly, like the hum of distant bees. Other nights it rumbled like unseen waves against an invisible shore. Sometimes it grew so strong that the hair on one's arm stood upright, as if something vast moved deep beneath the surface. The valley dwellers knew it was not a warning, but the long breath of an ancient world. They sat around the stones and listened, not seeking meaning, but remembering a feeling almost forgotten, the feeling of belonging to something far greater than themselves. In the surviving stone carvings, small spirals and wave-like lines were found. Modern researchers often call them decorations, but to the ancient builders, they were notations of sound. The spiral represented endless energy flow, and the wavy lines marked the Earth's frequency at a given time. When another architect from centuries later touched the same stone, they could sense the pattern of vibration stored within. Each stone thus became an instrument not for the ears, but for the body. During certain winters, when the northern sky turned green and violet, the stones changed tone. Their frequency followed the motion of light, creating a subtle harmony between earth and air. In those days, people did not divide sky from ground or land from sea. All were parts of one slow-moving consciousness. They believed the stone's sound was the Earth's response to the sky's speech through aurora, and that was why the site remained sacred. Not because gods descended there, but because it was where the world truly spoke to itself. Some of the keepers claimed they could recall the sound even in dreams. They said it called names. They did not recognize names that felt important but could not be spoken. In the stillness of dream, they heard phrases like prayers, though no words could be translated. When they awoke, there was an unexplainable calm, like returning from a distant but familiar place. Perhaps that was why the keepers remained for generations, even after others abandoned the valley. They were not guardians of stone, but listeners of the world. At times, in the stillest nights, they felt the stones tremble gently. No wind, no quake, only a slow, breath-like motion. If one touched the surface then, they would feel a strange warmth, as though the stone held blood. Modern minds might call it illusion or electromagnetic play, but to those ancient souls, it was real. Stones were not for explanation, but experience. They knew knowledge did not always arrive through thought, it also came from the depth of long silence. Years later, travelers from the south arrived with medals, writings, and new names for the world. They mocked the keepers, calling them worshippers of dead matter. Yet night after night, those travelers dreamed strange dreams. In their sleep, they heard the hum rising from the ground. Some tried to leave, but always returned, uneasy, without knowing why. Perhaps because in that valley they had heard something older than memory. Something that once heard never truly left the mind. On the fourth night after the travelers' arrival, the mist came down earlier than usual. The valley was wrapped in a thin veil of cold silk that moved slowly among the stones. In the distance, moonlight shimmered faintly on the megaliths, making everything resemble a sea of breathing rock. No one spoke that night, knowing any sound would feel too loud. A young traveler, still wearing metal at his belt, sat leaning against the largest stone. He was not sleepy, though it was long past midnight. He heard something, a sound barely real. At first, he thought it was the wind, but soon realized it followed a rhythm, like the slow breathing of the earth's belly. He closed his eyes, his body vibrating gently in tune with the tone, until he drifted into sleep, unaware he was listening to something older than human dreaming. The next morning, he told his companions, but none believed him. They laughed quietly and returned to checking their tools. Only one of the stone keepers looked at him with a knowing gaze. The keeper walked closer, placed a hand on his shoulder, and whispered that he had heard the song of the earth. Then he left, saying nothing more, as if that sentence was explanation enough. From that day, the young traveler never slept easily again. He began dreaming of long corridors made of stone, twisting down into the earth, their walls trembling softly, as if singing in an untranslatable tongue. A few days later, the other travelers began to hear it too. A faint sound at night, especially between two parallel stones. It was like a whisper, yet not from the air. Some said it was like flowing water. Others said it was a long exhale from beneath the ground. One of them, an old scribe, tried to record the sound's rhythm as symbols on animal hide, hoping to decipher its meaning. Yet every time he looked back at the markings, the symbols appeared to change order, refusing to be read by human logic. He began to feel that the sound was not a message to be understood, but one to be remembered. The following night, under a cloudless sky where the stars seemed so near they trembled, the keepers and travelers sat together in a circle among the stones. No words were spoken, only long silences interrupted by soft breaths. Then, slowly, from beneath their feet came a faint vibration, like a flute played deep within the earth. The sound rose, swirling among them, slipping into their chests, until several began to weep without knowing why. Someone tried to speak, but no voice came. In that moment, all differences dissolved. Keeper, traveler, and even time itself seemed to halt. When morning came, the mist lifted quickly. The stones appeared subtly changed, lighter on their eastern sides, as if they had absorbed the night's light. The travelers watched in silence while the keepers stood calmly, their faces serene. No one explained what had happened, for nothing needed explaining. Only one truth was shared. They had heard something real, though it could neither be shown nor recorded. From that day, there were no more mocking laughs. Instead, the travelers began to dig near the stones not for treasure, but to find the source of the sound. They uncovered small tunnels descending below, but none dared to go too deep. From the darkness came a low, unending hum. Weeks later, as they prepared to leave the valley, the young traveler who first heard the sound chose to stay. He said the valley had called to him in a way he could not explain. The others only nodded, perhaps feeling the same unspoken pull. He remained with the keepers, learning to listen to the earth, until one night he no longer felt like a stranger in the world. He had become part of a rhythm, older than language. The days that followed carried a different rhythm. The young traveler began waking earlier than the other keepers, sitting silently beside the great stone, waiting for the sun to rise through the fog. He learned to tell time, not by the movement of shadows, but by the changing hues on the surface of the stone. Sometimes it turned pale blue, sometimes silvery like fish scales, and on certain days a faint red shimmer appeared for a few seconds before vanishing. He kept all of it in memory, for the keepers did not write. They believed that anything written lost its breath, as if writing was a gentle form of death. So all that mattered was remembered, whispered, or woven into songs sung only on chosen nights. One morning, an old keeper approached, carrying a small vessel of water drawn from beneath the stone. The water was cold as ice, yet clear enough to see the bottom. The keeper sat beside him, poured a little onto the ground, and said softly that this water was not merely for drinking. He called it liquid light, for in the age before the earth grew heavy, such water was used to glimpse the time yet to come. The young traveler gazed into the vessel, and indeed, something strange shimmered there. The surface did not reflect the sky, but showed faint motions of mist within. He nearly lost his balance, staring too long, then closed his eyes and breathed deeply. The old keeper smiled, saying he had just seen a fragment of a time untouched by the world. That night, the traveler dreamed of stones turning into light. In his dream, the keepers stood around the stone, each holding a bowl of glowing water. They poured it slowly upon the stone, and each drop made a sound like a delicate musical note. The stone vibrated, reflecting light toward the heavens until the whole valley became a living lake of silver. When he awoke, his heart was pounding not from fear, but from the strange sense of remembering something he had long forgotten. In the days that followed, he began to observe every motion of the keepers more closely. They rarely spoke, yet every gesture had meaning. When they arranged small stones around the great circle, he could see that every placement mattered. He realized, slowly and deeply, that the keepers were maintaining a balance between sound and form, between light and shadow. They did not build to endure, but to remember. Every standing stone was part of a song that could only be heard when the world was quiet enough to listen. One evening, as the sun sank and its last orange light touched the stones, he heard something different. The earth's voice returned, but now it was closer, clearer, like a plucked string of some vast instrument. He lowered his head and pressed his ear to the ground. The vibration was gentle but steady, like a heartbeat deep beneath the soil. He looked toward the keepers, who stood still and silent, watching him in return. In that stillness, he felt accepted, as if the earth itself had finally recognized him. That night, he dreamed again. This time, he stood in the same place, but the stones were gone. In their stead was only light, moving slowly in a circle. In the center stood a tall figure whose face he could not see. A soft voice spoke to him not in any language he knew, yet the meaning flowed straight into his mind. The voice told him that the stones were not built to mark a place, but to keep time from collapsing entirely. He awoke with wet eyes, feeling as though he had been entrusted with a message he could never speak. The next day began with a silence thicker than usual. The mist hung lower, covering part of the stone circle until only the tips were visible, like ancient teeth jutting from the earth. The air smelled of wet metal, and the wind moved so gently it seemed afraid to disturb whatever was happening beneath the surface. The young traveler sat at the edge of the circle, staring toward the largest stone in the center. Something about it had changed. Not much, just a faint crack he hadn't noticed before, forming a shape almost like an unfamiliar symbol. He traced it with his eyes, feeling as though the stone itself was breathing, slowly revealing itself to those patient enough to understand. That day, the keepers moved with a peculiar stillness, slower, more deliberate, as if they sensed something approaching. None of them spoke. They carried bowls of water and placed them around the circle. The water inside trembled faintly, as if responding to vibrations from the earth's depths. The traveler noticed that every bowl was placed at an equal distance and angle, forming from above a perfectly symmetrical pattern. It reminded him of waves frozen in midair, or ripples suspended on water when something light was dropped upon it. By noon, the sun pierced through the mist and struck the central stone directly. The light reflected strangely upon the bowls, creating small points of illumination that drifted along the ground like lost fireflies. The eldest keeper stood in the middle, raised his hands, and closed his eyes. He murmured something so softly the traveler could barely hear, but the air began to shift. The temperature dropped, and the thick mist began to spiral above them. Low hum filled the air, and the earth trembled gently beneath their feet. The stones echoed in rhythmic tones, like an instrument awakened by time itself. The traveler closed his eyes, and within the darkness he saw lines of light forming intricate patterns. Each line seemed to connect the bowls of water to the stones and then to the sky. He realized that the three were not separate things. Water reflected light, stone carried sound, and air served as the bridge binding them. When one moved, the others responded. When one rested, the others fell still. Everything recognized each other in perfect silence. It felt like witnessing the earth praying to itself. When he opened his eyes, the mist was breaking apart. The sky above the valley turned pale blue, and sunlight struck his face directly. The keepers remained quiet, but their expressions had softened, as though they had received news too profound to speak of. The largest stone now glowed faintly, and on its surface appeared a shadowy imprint of a human hand just for a moment, then gone. No one reacted, as if it had happened countless times before. Yet for the young traveler, it felt like witnessing the first trace of something beyond human comprehension. He did not know whether he was seeing the past or the future, for the boundary between them had dissolved. That night, he sat alone at the edge of the valley, watching the remnants of twilight cling to the northern clouds. He thought of how all these things were connected stone, water, light, sound, all part of one immense body, slowly moving in its long sleep. He began to understand why the keepers never wrote, never built homes, never marked time. To them, the world never truly stopped. It only changed shape from sound to stone, from water to light, from past to echo, endlessly repeating in the heart of the earth. The next night carried an uncanny stillness, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The moon hung low, its pale light spilling directly onto the stone circle, casting long shadows across the valley. The young traveler couldn't sleep. His mind kept circling back to the symbol on the great stone, now alive in his memory. He walked toward it slowly, listening to the sound of his footsteps on damp earth. As he reached the center, the air grew heavier, filled with a faint vibration. He placed his hand upon the stone, and at that instant, the entire circle pulsed softly, like a heartbeat within the ground. He pressed his ear against the surface. A sound rose distant, faint, like a whisper carried from beyond time itself. It wasn't human. It was a murmur somewhere between wind and water, rhythmic and patterned. He closed his eyes to listen deeper, and suddenly he saw flashes of the same valley, but without mist, without keepers, just young stones under a brighter sky. A great river once flowed where the valley now lay, and the shape of the stone circle had first emerged from its swirling currents. When he opened his eyes again, something had shifted. The wind was gone. The moon seemed larger, and the shadows of the stones stretched like glowing nets across the ground. He realized then that the stones were not relics. They were parts of something still working, a mechanism or bridge of sorts. He felt himself pulled toward the center, not by force, but by a subtle call rising from within the earth. The stone before him began to tremble, and from the crack he had noticed earlier, a pale blue light seeped out. The light wasn't blinding. It was gentle, almost inviting. Within it, he saw patterns like stars connected by thin lines, shifting slowly until they formed a double spiral, the same symbol engraved on the keeper's wrists. Then it struck him. It wasn't a mark of their tribe, but a map. It's not a map of space, but of time. Each loop of the spiral represented a layer of existence, moving inward toward a single point where all time converged. He looked at the stone with awe and dread. The keepers weren't worshiping it. They were guarding it, ensuring it remained untouched by those unprepared. The stones, along with the light, sound, and water, formed a system capable of opening a gap between past and future. Not through machines or metal, but through harmony itself. The earth beneath them wasn't dead. It was a living lattice of time, waiting to respond to the right resonance. He stepped back, trying to steady his breath, but the ground began to tremble again. The circle vibrated, and the blue lines ran from stone to stone, forming a perfect ring. The air shimmered like heated water. The moonlight was being drawn in, twisting into a spiral above the center. He knew if he stayed, he would be pulled in, but curiosity, fierce and unstoppable, drove him forward. As he stepped into the light, the world vanished in silence. No wind, no ground, only darkness and swirling radiance. And in that void, the same voice from within the stone spoke again, now clear and close. Time does not move. Time breathes. As he stepped deeper into the vortex of light, space itself began to dissolve around him. There was no ground or sky anymore, only a vast sea of color, moving slowly, like a tide beneath the moon. Every motion of his hand left a glowing trail, like liquid ink in the air. He tried to look ahead, but only fleeting images appeared: buildings, trees, rivers, human faces, all shifting without order, as if time itself was replaying its memories. Among those fragments, he saw something familiar. Great stones newly carved, hands working calmly, forming the same circle that now stood in the valley. They were not using hammers or chisels, but low, resonant chants that made the stones move, swaying gently as though following the heartbeat of the earth. He realized he was witnessing the forgotten age, the first builders. When the world was young and the air was thick with light, the sky was golden, and in the distance, mountains that are now flattened still stood high, pale blue beneath a warm mist. At their peaks were tall towers of white stone, gleaming softly, reflecting a sun that never set. The people here had skin as pale as snow, and eyes that shone with the color of the deep sea. They spoke little. Their communication carried through songs echoing across valleys. Every rock, every drop of water, even every gust of wind seemed to answer their melodies. The world breathed in perfect harmony, where the boundary between beings and elements was not yet fixed. The traveler walked among them, unseen, only an observer from another time. The air was warm and filled with fine golden dust. A great silver-white bird glided overhead, its wings twice the length of a human's body. It didn't flap, just drifted effortlessly, as though the air itself helped it stay aloft. Below, the builders stood encircling the largest stone, which glowed faintly like the heart of the world. They sang a deeper tone now, and the ground trembled in rhythm. The stone began to shine, etching the same spiraling pattern the traveler had seen in his own time. Then something changed in their song. The notes cracked slightly, carrying a sadness too vast to be hidden. Their faces showed weariness and a quiet knowledge of what was coming. They looked toward the sky, now dimming from gold to gray to black. Along the horizon, a streak of light appeared, silver and sharp, followed by a deep, resonant sound that shook the air. A star fell, so bright that for a moment the whole valley turned to day. The builders stopped singing. They bowed their heads and walked away from the circle one by one, as though they knew their creation had reached its destined end. The traveler wanted to shout, to ask who they were and why they left, but his voice was swallowed by sudden silence. The light around him dimmed, and the landscape faded. Only the stones remained ancient now, cracked and cold. He found himself once again in the circle, yet the world felt heavier. From afar, he could hear the dripping of water within the rocks. He understood then that what he had seen was not only the past, but a warning. The builders had left something within the stones, not just structure, but a message. A language of time, legible only to those who could be still long enough to hear it. He knelt and placed his hands on the ground. It was warm, as though it had just held the breath of a vanished world. Somewhere deep below, perhaps those first builders were still keeping something sound, light or a secret not yet ready to rise again. The world above was only a shell, while beneath it, the earth's heart continued to guard the memory of the hands that once shaped it. He looked up at the sky, and through thin clouds, he saw a faint shadow of a white tower, like the reflection of an ancient memory, still trembling in the air. He did not rise immediately after seeing the shadow of that tower. Something within him urged stillness, a gentle pull to remain quiet, as if the very space around him was now watching back. The air thickened and trembled faintly, like the heartbeat of the earth pulsing beneath the ground. Out of that silence came something almost like sound, too low to be called a word. At first it resembled the swirl of wind, then began forming a repeating rhythm and echo, leaping from stone to stone. He closed his eyes, and gradually the sound became a rhythm that could be felt, not heard. Each pulse seemed to draw his nerves in a certain direction, his fingertips trembling softly. He realized this sound was not coming from outside, but rising from within him, resonating at the same frequency as the stones. He began to perceive the waves as language. There were no letters, no syllables, only vibrations carrying meaning. The first wave spoke of creation, of hands shaping the world through light and sound. The second carried the feeling of loss, as if the earth once mourned something it loved. The third held awareness, a realization that these stones carried their own memories, now choosing to whisper fragments of them to him. He became a bridge between past and present, between what was extinct and what still breathed. The longer he sat, the clearer the pattern became. The sound shifted into form, and those forms appeared in the air as glowing mist, swirling in silent rhythm. The spiral returned more intricate now, branching and weaving. He saw how each line connected, forming a map not of geography, but of relationships between time, place, and memory. The map pulsed like a living heart, syncing with his own heartbeat. Something in his mind opened, not physically, but as though a curtain lifted to reveal a hidden chamber of consciousness. In that chamber, he saw the builders again. But this time, they were not in the valley, nor among the stones. They hovered above a mirror-like sea, not fully human, nor entirely light. They gazed at him calmly, and in their eyes there was no threat, only vast understanding. One of them, the eldest, whose face was nearly translucent, drifted closer. There was no movement of lips, yet the message reached him clearly within. "You have heard the first echo," the voice said, "but each echo bears a weight. Are you ready to hear them all?" The question lingered endless. He gave no spoken answer, only bowed slightly, for part of him already knew the choice had been made long before he arrived. The figure lifted a hand, and the water below rippled gently, forming rings that reflected his own face. In that reflection, he saw something startling. He was no longer the same traveler. His skin glowed faintly. His eyes reflected soft light, and on his chest, a luminous spiral turned slowly, the same as the one carved into the ancient stones. He touched his chest, feeling a calm warmth, and heard the builder's song again, clearer, nearer. They sang not in notes, but in awareness itself, a song meant not for years, but for time. Each vibration pierced the layers of reality, making the air lighter around him. His body began to dissolve, its edges fading into the larger pattern. There was no fear, no desire to resist, only an ancient peace, as though he had finally returned to something that had been waiting for him all along. He did not know how long he had sat there, surrounded by soundless light and timeless air. Time flowed like water through the air, erasing the line between before and after. He opened his eyes slowly and found himself in a different place, though he had felt no movement. The sky above was pale silver, like a sheet of liquid metal reflecting a colorless world. The ground beneath shimmered faintly, covered in a thin layer of crystal that cracked gently under his steps. He knew this was not an ordinary realm, for there was no scent of earth, no whisper of wind, a light hum like the breathing of stone. In the distance rose tall, slender towers, carved as if from within a single piece of rock. Each one glowed with a light that seemed to come from within rather than any sun. Between them stretched curved bridges, floating without support. As he walked, each step sent a pulse through his chest, as though the land itself was alive and listening through vibration, not sound. At a distance, he saw shadows shaped like humans moving slowly among the pillars of light. They were not solid, but neither were they ghosts. They were traces, reflections of lives once real in this place. He tried to call out, but no voice left his mouth. Only a thin shimmer of light escaped his lips, dissolving in the air. Yet the beings seemed to hear, for they turned toward him in unison, their movements serene and deliberate, like time spinning within water. One approached, its form glowing softly with a pale blue hue. Its face was indistinct, but its eyes, two circles of white radiance, looked directly into him. It did not speak, yet meaning poured effortlessly into his mind. "Welcome to the place where time looks upon itself," the voice echoed gently within. "We are what remains of the first civilization that carved form from silence. We built this realm when the earth knew no direction, and the seas had not yet learned their boundaries. We built with light and vibration, not with hands. We shaped form so that time could see itself reflected, and so that life could mirror its own awareness. He listened without fully understanding, yet his body recognized truth. Something deep in his chest trembled, like a string plucked softly, and with every tremor came memories not his own. He saw fleeting images, a world without sky, only mist and swirling light. From the mist, shapes emerged, not born, but formed by will. The first structures rose not by lifting stone, but by consciousness condensing into form. He saw radiant hands arranging spirals in the air, creating space, direction, and sound. The being walked beside him through a vast, circular gate that turned slowly. Beyond it lay a garden, not one of human earth, but one grown from light. Trees glowed softly, their leaves like thin glass that hummed faintly. On the ground, streams of light flowed like rivers, branching into glittering geometric veins. He felt an indescribable peace, not from beauty, but from balance. Everything felt in harmony, as if this world knew exactly where every light and shadow belonged. The being stopped before a large stone floating at chest height. The stone rotated slowly, its surface shifting with faces, symbols, and stars. "This is the core of our knowledge," the being said in his mind. "We do not keep it in writing, for words die with time. We embed it in vibration, in forms that can only be understood by those who are still those who come not to claim, but to listen." He watched the stone, and the longer he stared, the deeper he felt pulled into it. The shifting patterns spun faster, forming a vortex of light that began to swallow his vision. Within the vortex, he saw worlds born and destroyed, mountains rising, seas drying, stars igniting and dimming. All of it happened not in time, but in rhythm with his heartbeat. And he realized something both terrifying and beautiful. Perhaps the first architects never truly vanished. They had merely transformed themselves into pattern, into the very echoes that now live within the structure of the world itself. Slowly, he began to understand that this was not a world in the sense he once knew. There was no boundary between himself and what surrounded him. Each step he took did not move him elsewhere, but deepened his understanding of the same place. He realized he was walking within memory, not upon earth. All he saw, towers, gardens, rivers of light, were not real things, but arrangements of thought, created by ancient beings to keep their memories from dissolving into time. Within each glimmer of light was an echo of a voice once alive. Within each shadow, a trace of hands that had built this world. It was like a book, not written with ink, but with awareness. Every traveler would read a different story, for its pages shifted to reflect the soul that read them. He stopped at the edge of the river of light, watching it flow without sound. On its surface appeared his reflection, though not as he remembered. The face was older, its eyes reflecting the silver sky, surrounded by faint symbols like letters of a forgotten language. He reached out to touch it, and when his fingers entered the glowing water, his body filled with warmth that turned heavy, as though time itself pulled him inward. He saw thousands of events, not his own people clothed in stone fiber, building immense walls without tools, shaping the air with their hands. They spoke not in words, yet all around them responded to thought. Stones lifted, forming arches, and light adhered to those forms like skin to flesh. Among the visions, he saw the same luminous being who had guided him before, yet now younger, stronger, full of intent. He understood that the figure beside him was not separate, but the residue of his own ancient consciousness. He had once been part of them, or at least part of the will that gave them existence. What he saw was not a foreign realm, but a forgotten home, built by a version of himself older than history. The awareness seeped into his mind like a whisper from within. You have returned because time is ready to remember itself. He looked up at the sky, which now moved slowly, as if turning a page. Each light shimmered into formaps, symbols, faces, and cities rotating within layers of reality. He saw impossible structures, buildings without distinction between inside and outside, like worlds folding into pattern. He realized that the first architecture was not about construction, but about dialogue between the universe and itself. Each structure was a prayer, each pattern a thought, each vibration a consciousness giving itself form to be seen. He understood how small modern understanding was compared to theirs. While men built to survive, the ancient ones built to remember. They shaped not for shelter, but for continuity between time and awareness. In that stillness, he felt the world was not a place to explore, but to recall. Nothing was lost, only asleep, waiting for one who could see not with eyes, but with memory. He closed his eyes, and the world pulsed gently, breathing with him. In each pulse came faint echoes from the past, voices merging into a single unending phrase he could not translate. Yet he knew it was not farewell. It was a call to return, not to a place, but to the awareness he had once left behind. When he opened his eyes, the garden of light began to fade. The towers turned to transparent silhouettes dissolving into air. He knew the realm was not gone, only hidden once more. He stood in the swirling silver mist as the final echo lingered. Do not look for us in stone or in the sky, for we never left. We dwell between the beats of your heart, in every form you behold, in every space you create to think. We are the pattern waiting to be remembered. He nodded softly, unsure to whom he replied. Then his steps faded with the light, leaving only the faint trace of someone who may once have been an architect of worlds. As his consciousness began to surface, the world trembled softly, like a sheet of water touched by the wind. He felt light, yet he also felt the absence of something he could not name. The light around him dimmed into a thinning mist until he stood once again on solid ground, among stones covered in moss. The sky above was pale gray, undecided between day and dusk. He recognized the place, though he could not remember ever being there. A quiet plain stretched beneath snow-layered mountains, and in its center stood a half-cut structure, like ruins left unfinished. But as he approached, he realized it was not ruin, it was concealment. The stones seemed arranged to guard something far beneath, not simply to mark what once was. He walked between cracked walls, his footsteps echoing softly, as if the place remembered the sound of him. The carvings on the stone were too delicate for crude tools, too precise for human hands. The lines formed patterns almost invisible, like inscriptions that could only be seen by certain light. He traced them with his fingers, and for an instant the air trembled before settling again. He knew something within the stones was still alive, not in a biological sense, but in the way time holds memory. In the silence, he heard a sound like the breathing of the earth, gentle and deep, rising from the cracks between the buried stones. He knelt and placed his palm upon the ground. There was a faint pulse there, like a heartbeat echoing from deep below. The longer he listened, the clearer it became. Not a heartbeat, nor mere vibration, but a rhythm resembling language, one that had been forgotten. He could not translate it, yet his body recognized it. The rhythm sank into his bones, merged with his blood, and slowly something within him began to open. He was no longer merely remembering. He was beginning to understand. Time seemed to halt. The wind stilled. The mist hung motionless, holding its breath. Then shadows took form before him, human-like figures standing in a circle, each holding a glowing stone. They did not look at him, yet they seemed aware of his presence. From their hands rose a soft light that reached toward the sky. In a moment, the gray sky turned bright, filled with lines of light, weaving an immense pattern. He realized it was a map, not of place, but of consciousness. The luminous points were not stars, they were memories. He gazed upward, feeling that every point of light was an eye watching him. Eyes from the past, from those who had lived before time began. He felt a strange gratitude, a blend of longing and certainty. This world had never truly vanished. It had only changed form to survive within time. The stones, the patterns, the sounds he heard were not remnants of history, but another language of being. He began to understand that the first architects did not build to leave legacy. They built to create doors through which their future selves might return. He stood within the stone circle, allowing his body to merge with stillness. Each breath he exhaled seemed to write something upon the air. In the quiet, he heard a voice, soft and deep, not from without, but from within his own mind. "We are not lost," it said. "We have only hidden within the forms you call the world." He looked around and saw that every stone, every grain of earth, pulsed with a subtle vibration, a web of invisible threads binding all things. He no longer felt alone, for now he knew the world was listening, just as he was listening to the world. He began to realize that what people called architecture was not merely about stone and structure, but also about the way the world preserved memory. Standing among structures still standing after thousands of years, he slowly understood that the stones were a form of language no longer spoken. Every curve, every edge, every small hollow between stones seemed crafted with a purpose beyond ordinary construction. He saw the same pattern repeated everywhere on walls, floors, even in the air gaps between columns. It all followed the same rhythm, like a musical notation unheard by human ears. Perhaps this was why ancient places felt alive, even when empty, for their forms still echoed the minds that had built them. He moved deeper into the narrowing chamber. Light spilled from cracks in the ceiling, illuminating fine dust drifting in slow motion. In that half-living darkness, he saw something like a mirror, not of metal or glass, but of a stone surface too smooth to be natural. When he looked into it, the reflection was not his own. Instead, it was a vision of a city unknown to him, filled with towers and structures rising beneath a silver sky. The city was silent, yet achingly beautiful. Its streets were wide and straight, adorned with faintly glowing symbols. He realized he was seeing a reflection of time, not of space. The stone was a window, holding the memory of when humankind first learned to build. His footsteps echoed, and the vision on the stone shifted. He saw figures dressed simply, working in silence. They did not seem like slaves or laborers, but like keepers of rhythm. Every movement was synchronized, every stone laid with sacred patience. There was no command, no overseer. They seemed to know exactly what to do without being told. He felt both awe and fear, for such harmony was rare among humans. He wondered whether these builders were truly human, or beings dwelling between dimensions of time and awareness. At the far end of the chamber stood something resembling an altar. There was no idol, no sign of sacrifice, only a large stone with swirling patterns carved upon its surface. He approached and touched it carefully. The moment his fingers met the surface, the entire room changed. The air vibrated, and the walls reflected a faint light. A humming sound rose, coming from no clear direction. It was not threatening, but a gentle call from the depths of the earth. He closed his eyes, and in the darkness behind his eyelids, he saw spiraling patterns of light. They were the same as those on the outer stones. Everything was connected, like veins within the body of the earth itself. When he opened his eyes, the room had transformed. The stones glowed softly, revealing new carvings that had been invisible before. Among them were images resembling humans, though with unusual proportions. Their heads were large, their arms long, their eyes mirror-like. They gazed upward at stars, perhaps, or at something higher still. Beneath the images ran repeating symbols, inscribed like mantras across the entire surface. He could not read them, yet somehow he felt they spoke directly to him in a voiceless tongue. Slowly, he sat before the stone, trying to understand the message conveyed through shape and light. In that silence, he realized the whole place was a machine of knowledge, not built to be worshipped, but to be remembered. A machine that recorded the movement of consciousness, the evolution of thought, and the shifting of life's design across ages. He no longer felt like a visitor, but a component within that mechanism. A small gear turning within the architecture of awareness that had existed since the dawn of time. He began to understand that to witness such a place was to become part of an unwritten history. In the deepening silence, his mind began to tremble, like the surface of water touched by a faint wind from an unknown direction. He could no longer distinguish the boundary between himself and the surrounding space. The faint hum that had once sounded distant now turned into a slow rhythm, almost like breathing emanating from the stones. The room was alive, and he felt his heartbeat matching the pulse of the softly glowing stones around him. Each inhalation brought an image, each exhalation a memory not his own. He saw fragments of time that history could not explain, vast valleys with rivers gleaming like liquid silver, mountains carved with precision beyond human hands, and skies painted in layered lights like aurora curtains shifting with the earth's breath. He saw a group of beings standing on a high plain. They resembled humans, yet their movements were slower, balanced, almost dance-like. Every gesture seemed to align the air around them, forming mist at their feet. At the center stood one taller figure, with skin pale as marble and eyes glowing faintly like distant stars. The figure raised a hand toward the sky, and from its fingertips fell threads of light like gentle rain, touching the ground and making it tremble softly. In that moment, he understood he was witnessing not a ritual, but the creation of the world's first architectural form. The stones around him, the symmetry and shapes that had survived through time, all originated from that quiet, deliberate act. He began to hear words, though not through his ears. They came from within, yet not from him. "We build not to dwell, but to remember," the voice said softly, echoing within his chest. Form is language. Stone is script, written for those not yet born. His chest tightened not from fear, but from realizing how small human effort was within the grand flow of knowledge that had existed long before writing began. The voice continued, "Architecture is not building, but the world arranging its own thoughts. Every structure stands not upon earth, but upon the memory of all that has ever lived." He looked again at the walls around him, now pulsing with gentle light like veins. The entire chamber, he realized, was not meant to be seen, but absorbed. As he walked along its edges, the light shifted with each step, as though the stones recognized him. The carved symbols moved, reshaping themselves into new patterns. He touched one symbol, and suddenly his mind filled with voices from across time, people speaking in languages never known. Footsteps on damp soil, hammers striking stone, and in between, whispers teaching the balance between form and soul. He understood now that this place was not merely a remnant of the past, but a knot of time where ages intertwined. All who had ever built, all who had ever dreamed of home and shelter, converged here without boundary. He heard the shadows of the first builders conversing without sound, remembering each other not by name, but by pattern. In that stillness, he realized that every structure of the modern world was only a faint echo of an ancient idea, the idea that form itself was an extension of consciousness. He closed his eyes, and within the darkness he felt the flow of energy linking him to the stones, to the earth, to the air, vibrating softly around him. He did not know how long he sat there. Time dissolved, leaving only calm. He understood that the place demanded no comprehension, only presence. In that perfect stillness, he felt accepted by something older than all words, deeper than all form. He no longer sought answers, for he had become part of the question itself. He began to realize that the boundary between his body and the space around him was slowly dissolving. The air he breathed felt heavy, filled with fine particles that were not mere dust, but something alive. Each breath he took seemed to draw those particles into his blood, making him part of the structure he had admired. His skin began to glow faintly, reflecting the same light as the stones on the wall. A subtle vibration moved through him, from his fingertips to his chest, spreading throughout his body. The vibration was not just sensation, it was communication without language. he began to understand that these stones were not dead matter, but entities holding the collective consciousness of the world's first builders. Suddenly, he no longer saw himself as an observer, but as one of them. In his mind, he stood upon a vast plain beneath a gray sky shrouded in mist. The ground beneath his feet was soft like clay, easily shaped by hand. Around him were others, each working silently, carving, lifting, aligning without words. They moved with the rhythm of the earth, not by command. Every stone had a purpose, every gap a meaning, every line an intention. He understood that their work was not merely construction, but prayer through form. They built not to shelter bodies, but to anchor memory so the world would not forget itself. In that awareness, he saw the first forms of architecture unknown to modern history. Spiraled pillars turning with the wind's direction. Domes that trembled softly when touched by light. Walls made of glowing minerals that absorbed heat and distributed it evenly through the structure. Their architecture did not divide nature from creation, for to them, building meant imitating the earth's way of growing. Roots became columns, stone became bone, water became the pulsing heart of a city. Every structure was an organism, and every organism reflected a living thought. Then the voice returned, softer now, as if emerging from within him. "You see with their eyes, but you do not yet understand," it said. "We never left the world, we became part of it." He closed his eyes and felt the pulse of the earth merge with his breath. In that stillness, he saw the builder's forms turn into light, spreading into patterns that wrapped the planet. The patterns formed a vast network connecting mountains, valleys, and seas, uniting everything within one great breathing consciousness. He thought of the ancient cities whose ruins remained. Perhaps they were never destroyed, only asleep, like bodies awaiting the return of their souls. Perhaps every stone site ever uncovered was just the outer skin of something still alive deep within the earth. He wondered if the modern world could still hear the breath of old architecture, or if humanity had lost the ability to feel the delicate vibrations between stone and time. There was no answer, only a gentle echo that threaded through his bones. Then he realized something deeper. True architecture was not meant to be seen, but experienced by consciousness. What humans called buildings were merely the outer face of a living thought. He realized that while modern man built to resist time, the first architects built to live in harmony with it. In that flowing awareness, he stood between two worlds, one solid and real, the other calm and eternal. He did not know where the boundary lay, but he knew he had become part of something beyond words. He opened his eyes slowly, and the walls around him seemed to breathe. The stones pulsed gently, reflecting hues that shifted like dust clouds. He did not know whether he still stood in the human world or had crossed elsewhere, but within him grew a deep peace. There was no fear, no urge to leave, only the understanding that everything ever built, whether by human hands or by time itself, was always trying to say the same thing, that form is language, and humanity is the sentence being written by the world. Within the calm that enveloped him like mist, he heard something different. Not a sound, not a vibration, but a kind of memory he had never possessed. He saw a group of people walking among tall stones that reflected light like glass. They did not speak, yet each step they took left trails of light that lingered in the air for a few seconds before fading. He realized what he was seeing was not the present it, was the Earth's own memory. The Earth remembers just as the sea remembers every ship that ever sank within it. Here, time did not move forward or backward, but circled endlessly upon itself. He saw a city that seemed to have grown from the soil rather than being built upon it. The structures looked as if they had been born of stone, fused with roots and wind. There were no boundaries between nature and creation, for both were aspects of the same consciousness. He walked slowly through corridors lit by floating orbs of light. These orbs did not hang nor shine from any source. They seemed like small living beings breathing silently. He reached out to touch one, and as his finger neared, it quivered and showed him a vision, a different world, another age. He saw tall, pale-eyed humans carving stone under a moon that never set. They did not appear old, yet their faces carried exhaustion not born of the body, but of time too long to measure. He understood they were the keepers of the first architecture, who built not for life, but to preserve something the world must never forget. The faint voice that had called him before now sounded deeper, as if from within his mind. "We built so the world would remember itself," it said. "We shaped stone so thought would not vanish in the current of time." He wondered what it was they sought to preserve. But before the thought could settle, the vision changed again. He stood at the edge of a vast cliff overlooking a black sea. Below, in the dark water, faint outlines of another city appeared. Pillars, roads, bridges waiting for someone to return and awaken them. He felt a subtle vibration rising from the depths, a whisper without words. He stared into the darkness and saw a faint flicker of light. He knew it was not the moon's reflection, but something alive in the deep, something staring back at him. Perhaps it was not a creature, but a lingering consciousness from the first builders. He felt their presence all around him, not as spirits or shadows, but as structure, as geometry, as vibration within the stone itself. He began to understand that every ancient monument humanity had ever uncovered across the continents was not coincidence, but part of a vast network, a system designed to maintain balance between the physical and the unseen. Then something strange happened. The stone beneath his feet began to tremble softly. Lines of light seeped from the cracks, flowing like thin rivers spreading across the ancient city. He watched in awe as the entire surface glowed, forming intricate geometric patterns. The design pulsed like a heartbeat, steady and calm. He realized he was witnessing the living heart of a world that once was, perhaps still is. Every glowing line was a vein carrying memory from the past. Every pulse a message from a civilization that time had tried but failed to erase. He did not know how long he stood there, only that time had stopped functioning, allowing him to listen to the Earth's true heartbeat. Amid the stillness, something within him vibrated too. He felt part of himself dissolve, slowly merging into the pulsating pattern of light. There was no fear, only deep serenity. He understood that to truly see the first architects, one must lose oneself. No one could comprehend their creation without becoming part of it. He closed his eyes, surrendering to the gentle light. Everything fell silent, and within that silence, a final whisper drifted through him like the earth's last breath. We were not the first. We were only the last who still remembered. In the stillness that felt like the space between two breaths, he found himself stepping into something that could no longer be called a world. He could not tell when the ground had ceased beneath his feet or when light began to hold him up. There was no direction, no horizon, only existence stretching endlessly, layered like reflections on ever-rippling water. In the distance, he saw faint shapes resembling structures, yet made not of stone or metal. They seemed woven from memory and echo, from emotions long erased but never entirely gone. Each form emitted a soundless hum, a vibration that passed through his chest and made his heart beat a line with it. He realized he was standing in a place where form and meaning were no longer separate, a place where architecture was not built, but thought itself taking shape. He walked slowly, sensing that each step created something around him. When he breathed, the unseen ground beneath him unfolded, spiraling to the rhythm of his pulse. Every exhale drew curves of light, shaping transparent walls that shimmered briefly before melting into air. He began to understand this was not a place built by hands, but by consciousness, by minds that could turn thought into structure. The first architects might never have carved stone as modern humans imagine. They sculpted with intent, built from remembrance, arranging the world through harmony between soul and matter. There was no line between creator and creation, for they were both sides of the same stillness. He looked around and saw something like a path, though not entirely real. It appeared when he looked at it, vanished when he looked away. Along that shifting path walked tall figures, moving slowly as if without purpose. They were not solid, but composed of soft, silvery light. He tried to approach, but each step closer made the air heavier, as though their presence altered gravity itself. One figure stopped and turned toward him. It had no face, only the impression of one, with dim light where its eyes might have been. Yet in that faceless gaze, he felt something vast and ancient, like the earth that had witnessed thousands of births and endings. The figure spoke without voice. Each word arrived directly in his mind. "You walk upon the memory of the world," it said. "Few endure this place, for it knows no time. It lives by repetition, and thoughts unanchored will dissolve into its current." He wished to ask what the current was. But before the question could form, he felt it a great movement beneath his awareness, like a river flowing without direction, carrying fragments of memory from ages unrecorded. Within it echoed the lives that had vanished, children laughing among stone ruins. The ring of metal hammered through mist, prayers whispered beneath a dome of sky no modern man had seen. He felt himself slowly drawn, not with fear, but calm acceptance. There was peace in the way that ancient current carried him, like an old hand guiding someone across the bridge of time. Within the flow, he saw shapes turning like stars in deep water. Some resembled symbols he had seen carved into pyramids, monoliths, remnants of civilizations no one could name. He realized these were not decorations or written language, but traces of communication between minds. Each form was a message sent from one consciousness to another, a system older than words or script. In deepening silence, another whisper came. We did not create the world. We only maintain its balance. The voice was so ancient, it seemed to rise from the planet's core. A form is nothing. Order is what endures. He turned toward the radiant beings and understood they were not creatures, but structures of awareness formed by time, part of a system preserving the world from collapse through forgetfulness. He began to understand why the first architects were never depicted as human, but as vast presences beyond shape. They were guardians of existence's rhythm, builders not for sight, but for remembrance. He kept walking, though direction no longer mattered. Before him, the light changed into patterns of growing complexity. Each line trembled gently, forming an inaudible harmony that felt like music within his chest. He knew he stood on the threshold of something deeper than space or time, the boundary between man and the earth's own memory. The sky around him slowly shifted into a color unknown, neither blue nor gray, but something like the hue of an unspoken thought. The air grew heavy, yet soft, like a delicate fabric wrapping the body. He sensed that the world around him was no longer made of space, but of memory stretched and trembling. Each motion of his hand sent waves from his fingertips, creating small vortices that revealed shadows of the past. Within them, he saw cities rise and fall, humans gazing toward the heavens before lowering their eyes to the earth, as though understanding something they would soon forget. He saw great hands shaping stone into perfect arches, arranging tall pillars without tools, guided only by calm will. He realized what he witnessed was not history, but the world's memory of itself. The earth forgets nothing, it merely hides memories beneath layers of time, like someone tucking away dreams into long sleep. This place, between form and light, was the earth's consciousness awakened. He heard a soundless pulse rising from unseen ground, flowing into his chest and stirring his mind. Within that vibration came the awareness that he was not a visitor, but a fragment of a greater mechanism. Every thought he held, every silence he created, every wonder he felt all were part of a pattern older than humankind's first name for itself. From afar, a faint thunder rolled, then became a voice inside his mind. Deep and resonant, it spoke with the weight of thousands of mouths speaking as one, yet none truly uttering. Form is condensed memory, it said. We, the keepers, build not to stand, but to preserve remembrance. Stone is only a tool, light merely a medium. His mind was drawn into those words, and before him rose a tower-like shape-knot, a physical one, but made of slow-turning layers of energy. Each layer glowed with its own hue, like emotions rendered visible. As he approached, the tower revealed itself as untouchable a reflection from another dimension, an unfinished thought made visible. Within its layers of light, faces appeared, hundreds, perhaps thousands, all overlapping and merging. Some were youthful, some aged, some not human at all. Yet all gazed in one direction toward him. The gaze was silent, not frightening, only patient, as if waiting for him to understand. He understood then. Those faces were not spirits, but the consciousnesses of the first builders merged into the lattice of time. They had not died, only transformed into the network, maintaining balance between form and meaning. He realized that every ancient stone, every monument under the sun, might be a remnant of this great process of frozen message for humans to hear the echoes of a language long lost. The world we walk upon was not built by hands alone, but by memory seeking to be remembered. Something within him trembled. The wall between himself and the world thinned. He no longer saw with eyes, but with awareness. Lines of energy connected everything: trees to stones, water to sky, air to himself. All were bound by a subtle symmetry, holding the world from collapse. That symmetry was the language of the first architects, a wordless system of harmony and balance. Every structure, every pattern in nature was a reflection of that vast hidden pattern of consciousness. He began to understand why certain places felt quieter, as if preserving echoes of something older than time. The voice spoke again, softer this time. Humans seek eternal forms, yet what endures is the unseen order. The sentence pierced through him and merged with his thought. He wondered whether he was dreaming or awakening from the dream called life. In silence, he knew that the first civilization built not only the visible world, but an invisible network, channeling meaning to keep existence aligned. They were not mere builders of cities, they were keepers of the balance between awareness and form. And perhaps every modern human still carries a faint trace of that pattern within, though long forgetting how to read it. He stood in that directionless space and slowly felt the boundary between his mind and the world dissolve. Thought no longer appeared as a voice in his head, but as gentle waves radiating from his entire body. He did not speak, yet each vibration became a word, each breath a sentence unspoken. The world around him listened, not with ears, but with its form. Stone trembled, air adjusted its rhythm, and even the distant sea seemed to hum. He began to understand that consciousness belonged not only to living beings, but to everything that had form and purpose. Every existing thing carried a small memory of its origin, like a speck of dust remembering the wind that once carried it. The voice that had once been foreign now seemed to come from within him. No longer an external whisper, but an echo from the deepest part of his soul, the part that had never spoken. "You are the late reader," it said gently, tender yet emotionless. "We wrote the world in form, and you arrived thousands of years after those stone letters began to fade. Yet form never dies, merely waits for a mind quiet enough to read it again." He looked down. The ground that had been empty now revealed strange patterns, like writing without letters. The lines curved, intersected, and vanished, only to reappear elsewhere. He tried to follow them with his eyes, but each time he moved his gaze, the patterns changed, adapting to his direction of thought. He crouched, pressed his palm to the ground, and instantly felt a vibration penetrate his heart. There were no images or words, yet something spoke to him. The voice no longer came from a single direction, but from all directions at once. "We did not build to defy time," it said again. "We built so that time would have direction." He tried to comprehend the phrase, but his thoughts splintered, unable to grasp its fully human meaning. Time had direction. He thought then time was not merely a flow, but a living being. Every structure, every standing stone, every sacred circle the ancients made was not a symbol, but an instrument ensuring that time did not lose its way. Then, in his vision, or perhaps a memory reopened, he saw a vast plain where the first builders worked. He used no tools, no ropes or wheels, but moved the stones through awareness. Each stone had a name known only to them, and when that name was spoken inwardly with the right vibration, the stone moved like a creature obeying in perfect harmony. There was no violence, no force-only alignment between form and will. He saw them arrange the massive stones in curved lines, following streams of energy flowing beneath the earth. Some of them walked slowly, heads bowed, listening to something under the soil, perhaps the earth itself, whispering where each piece of the world should rest. He realized that modern humans no longer hear such whispers. The world now is too loud, full of voices born from desire rather than balance. The first builders, or whatever they were called, lived in profound relationship with form. They wrote no history, left no written record. For what they built were sentences composed of stone, rivers, and stars. He began to understand the earlier phrase, "We built so that time would have direction." Without form, time is a boundless sea. But with form, time finds its orbit, recognizes itself, and avoids dissolving into chaos. When he lifted his gaze, the tower of light began to shift. Its layers spun faster, as if responding to his understanding. He sensed the world opening itself not to give him answers, but to show him how to ask. Humanity, he thought, had long demanded too much from the world, when all it ever wanted was to be listened to. The voice spoke once more, softer now, almost like his own breath. "Every structure has an echo," it said. "That echo lives within you, though you do not know its name." He closed his eyes, and in the darkness, he heard a long, fine tone, like a hum in the distance. The sound flowed through his bones, merging with his pulse. For a moment, he felt he was no longer an observer, but a part of the great symphony that had played since the world first breathed. The echo deepened, like a door unlocking after ages of silence. He saw a vast expanse bathed in soft light, like the first dawn touching the ancient earth. There stood the first builders' beings, almost human, yet moving with a slowness that suggested they lived within a rhythm longer than time itself. Their skin shimmered faintly like wet stone, and their eyes reflected the starlit heavens. No sound passed their lips, yet the world around them shifted, obeying every trace of their collective thought. They were not mere architects, but keepers of balance between element and direction. Every motion of their hands inscribed symmetry. Every step stitched the fabric of time. In the center of that plain, a great structure rose, not built from stone as humans know it, but from condensed light. It was not blinding, but soothing, like dusk that lingers on the skin. They arranged layer upon layer, as though composing echoes from the future. No tools, no commands, only serenity that merged with the breath of the earth. Above them floated faint circles, spinning slowly, perhaps stars or something older than stars. He realized this place was not just a world, but the threshold between reality and the origin of form. Everything that ever was, everything that would be, began from the calm hands that moved there. One of the builders approached. Its face bore no age, neither young nor old, suspended between both. It gazed softly, then pointed to the sky. A beam of light stretched across the horizon, connecting nameless mountains. The beam pulsed like a vein, and each pulse traced patterns on the ground, the same ones he had seen earlier in the Tower of Light. This is the pulse of the world. The voice resonated within him. Here we laid direction so that time would not fold back upon itself. He looked deeper, realizing that what they built was not a sanctuary, but a map for universal consciousness. He saw how they worked in harmony, not for power or grandeur, but to preserve balance. They knew that without form, energy would spiral into chaos, and without direction, time would endlessly loop. Within every structure, they embedded the memory of order. Stone was not merely stone, was a vessel for a resonance that kept the world steady. Seas, mountains, rivers all were parts of an invisible architecture. They did not divide the world into nature and man, for to them, both were two breaths of the same being. The world lived through form, and form lived through their attention. Yet among that harmony, something began to change. Some of the builders faltered, their eyes heavy, their movements out of sync. They began to look at form with desire, not understanding. The light they built began to crack, and from those fractures flowed something dark, not black, but void. The air trembled, and that perfect world lost its tone. The others tried to mend it, to restore the unity, but the current was too strong. In one long moment, that first world collapsed, not through destruction, but through the dissonance of thought. He saw some of them fall not to the ground, but into a depth without direction. They became shadows of the forms they once created. From that fall emerged a new world, the one humans would inherit, born from the remaining vibrations. The builders who stayed aligned did not vanish. They transformed into patterns hidden within stone, within waves, within the curve of wind. They could no longer speak, yet their echo endured, waiting for another being to hear it again. He understood that all of human history was a long echo of that first loss. Every monument, every structure built by human hands was an unconscious attempt to call harmony back. He watched the last builder standing amid the ruin. The figure closed its eyes and pressed a palm against the fractured earth. From its hand flowed gentle light, spreading in every direction, seeding consciousness into the world. "We do not die," the voice whispered one last time. "We become form within form." The light faded and silence returned. He stood alone, gazing into the emptiness. But within that quiet, he knew something still pulsed, soft and eternal. The world still breathed through stone, and the echoes of the first builders had never truly disappeared. After the light faded, the world seemed to hold its breath. Time did not move as humans know it, but flowed slowly, looping within itself. He stood in that empty plain, yet something trembled faintly in the air, a sound almost too soft to hear. Like a hum deep within the bones. He realized the echoes of the first builders had not vanished. They had only changed form, adapting to the new world. The ground, once bright, was now dark. Yet within that darkness pulsed a faint rhythm, that still remembered light. In every drifting grain of sand, in every touch of wind on the skin, remnants of consciousness lingered, half awake. He began to walk. His steps made no sound, as though the ground was not solid earth, but a weave of time guiding him. In the distance loomed a mountain, but its shape shifted like mist. Each time he focused, it moved again. He understood this was no longer the real world, but a memory space of something almost forgotten. The mountain was not stone, but an idea of steadfastness. The sea to the east was not water, but a reflection of awareness trying to recall its form. Everything here existed halfway between reality and dream. As he moved further, he found a great stone standing in the middle of the plain. From afar, it looked ordinary, but as he drew near, the air grew heavy. A steady vibration pulsed, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. He touched the surface. It was warm. Under his hand, faint light spiraled into delicate circles. The pattern resembled a map, yet not of places, but of memory. Lines of light connected scattered points like constellations. Each point held a story, and each story linked to the same core, a consciousness that refused to disappear. From the distance came a whisper, carried by the wind. He could not tell if it was a sound or a memory of one, but its words were clear. "We shaped forms so you may know meaning." The phrase floated gently, directionless. Beneath the ground, something stirred. A creature, but an awakening awareness. The surrounding stones seemed to breathe slowly, as if recalling something lost. He knew then this world was still alive, merely dreaming in a long slumber. Out of the silence appeared the shadow of a city made of soft light. Its structures hovered, unbound by earth, and every wall reflected the sky in impossible ways. He walked closer, and with every step, the city reshaped itself. Streets curved like letters writing their own names. Towers stood like frozen notes of music. He understood this city was not truly real, yet not entirely illusion. It was the embodiment of remembrance, the longing to recall the perfect world of the first builders. Humanity might not yet exist, but the seed of its consciousness had been planted here between echo and light. He stopped before a circular pool that mirrored an endless sky. Gazing into it, he saw a face, unknown, yet familiar. They were neither human nor divine, but shifting forms of awareness, changing as water changes shape to fit its vessel. In moments, they turned into mountains, oceans, and night skies. He realized he was witnessing the origin of imagination, where meaning had not yet been named. Every form the world would one day know was only a faint reflection of what he now beheld. Then, from beneath the water's surface, a soft light rose like morning mist. It formed delicate lines that became symbols. He could not read them, yet his heart understood. A message for those who would come long after this world was gone. "We were," said the light without sound. "And every stone you touch is our form that remains." The glow faded, and the pool fell silent again. Only the reflection of the sky remained, as if the world was gazing back at itself. He drew a slow breath and looked around. No form stayed still. All dissolved into soft haze. He understood his time here was ending. The world of the first builders was never meant to be seen again. It was an echo, a fragment of something once perfect, now remembered only in shadow. Yet he also knew nothing truly ends. As long as stone holds vibration, as long as humanity builds and dreams, the echo will live on, hidden within the breath of the world. As he left the city of light, a soft echo followed his steps, like a shadow unwilling to part. In the distance, the sky shifted hues from pale blue to a tender gray, then to faint gold. There was no sun, yet the world glowed from within, as if the earth itself still burned with ancient memory. He realized this journey was not a walk through space, but a passage through the oldest consciousness, where form and meaning first met. The air he breathed carried not only the scent of stone and dust, but also the faint trace of decaying time, a residue of an age too long asleep. He climbed a plateau veiled in mist. From above, the world resembled a delicate weave of light and shadow that changed direction as though alive. Beneath the mist, something faint appeared, perhaps ruins, perhaps mountains, perhaps only the reflection of his own thought. When he closed his eyes, a low sound reached him. It was deep, metallic, vibrating with rhythm, too deliberate to be chance. It was a kind of song, though without words. He knew then it was the voice of the first architects, the hum of knowledge flowing still through the veins of the earth. The voice spoke without language, yet its meaning unfolded within him. They spoke of measurements, of angles and distances, of how stone could be placed so that time itself could not move it. They explained that form was not the result of labor, but a reflection of harmony living within the universe. Every structure, every line, every curve was born from balance between the visible and the unseen. He began to understand that the first builders were not mere masons. They were keepers of the earliest laws of creation, translators of cosmic vibration into tangible form. Through the mist, something vast emerged. Stones stood in a circle, rising like the teeth of some ancient beast. Yet they did not crumble. They breathed faint light from their seams. As he approached, he realized the circle was no place of worship, but an instrument. Each stone faced a precise point in the heavens, long forgotten by modern eyes. This was no random construction, it was a star calendar, a time machine built by hands that knew the motion of the sky more deeply than any who came after. He knelt and touched the central stone. Beneath his palm, the same pulse he had felt before the slow heartbeat of the earth. The stone was alive. It remembered. In that instant, visions struck his mind like silent lightning. He saw pyramids built upon desert sand, long after the first builders were gone. He saw vast temples by river valleys where priests measured the sun's shadow with golden threads. He saw walls across distant continents bearing the same patterns, as if drawn from one forgotten design. He understood now every great civilization was no coincidence. They were the same echo, reborn through different hands, carrying the silent knowledge of a world that had once drowned. The voice grew clearer within him. Knowledge, it said, is never lost, it merely hides within new forms. Whenever humankind builds, they are listening, however faintly, to the echo of the first architects. The pyramids, ziggurats, menhirs, obelisks all are ways of remembering how form and meaning were first united. The first builders left no script, but left resonance. Their stones spoke not in letters, but in frequency. When one stands among them with a quiet heart, the world still speaks, though in a language only the soul can hear. He stood long within that circle. The mist moved slowly around him like water flowing through air. With eyes closed, he heard the last whisper of that ancient world. We did not leave. We wait within form. The sentence was soft, almost prayer-like. He felt the ground pulse faintly beneath his feet, sending its message to the living. He knew soon he would return to the brighter world, where ancient stones are seen as ruins. Yet for those who listen, ruins are not endings, they are doors. Within every broken stone, a voice still lingers, waiting for someone to hear it again. As night returned, the world seemed to breathe in a slow, secret rhythm. The wind moved between the ancient stones like the long exhale of something that was never entirely dead. He stood there for an immeasurable time, watching the mist drift beneath a starless sky. There was no sound, only the soft heartbeat of the earth beneath his feet. In that silence, he understood something difficult to name. Everything that had ever been built or broken, remembered or forgotten, came from the same source. He closed his eyes, letting his thoughts sink slowly, and the world around him seemed to dissolve into something simpler. There was no past or future only, a quiet existence trembling like threads of light between space and time. He began to descend the slope, lit faintly by the glow of the stones behind him. Each step left a trace that the mist soon erased, like riding upon water. Nothing followed him. Nothing held him back. Yet somehow, he knew the place would never truly disappear. The world of the first architects had not vanished. It merely hid beneath the layers of time and human motion. Their voices still vibrated in the stones, in the soil, even in the subtle tones of the air that sometimes carried strangeness at dusk. He thought of all the great cities he had seen, all the towers of glass and metal, all the straight lines drawn by hands that no longer remembered their origin. All of it was a faint inheritance, a long echo from the hands that once raised the first forms. When he reached the lowlands, the mist began to fade. The air grew warm and gentle, like the first breath of spring. In the distance lay wide plains, grass rippling like water beneath the tender light of a moon not yet full. He stopped, gazing at the horizon that stretched without end. In that calm, he felt the whole earth resting, waiting for someone to listen again to its pulse. He knew that after this, the world would return to its ordinary rhythm. People would work, cities would buzz, time would move forward without looking back. Yet deep within him, something had changed. He carried home no stones, no relics, but the quiet sense that every wall, every structure, every shadow humankind makes is an attempt to remember something very old, something that came before words or meaning. He looked up at the sky one last time. There were no stars, only soft, trembling darkness. He took a long breath and slowly closed his eyes, letting everything fade into silence. Within that silence, he heard the final whisper of the world he had left. We build so that time will not forget its shape. The sentence drifted through him like wind. He smiled faintly, then walked away, knowing perhaps the journey never truly ends. Every stone in the world, every shadow upon the ground, is a small reminder of the first hands that once worked in the darkness of creation. They are still there, waiting in form, waiting in stillness, waiting to be heard again. The sky turned softly gray-blue, and the world grew quiet. Beneath it, the earth pulsed with a breath that never ceased. Perhaps that is what eternity truly means, not living forever, but the continuity of form that never loses its meaning. He walked until his figure disappeared into the thin, returning fog, while behind him, the old stones still stood, keeping their secrets in eternal silence. The world kept turning, time kept moving, and the first architects continued to guard their forms within a long, unbroken sleep.